Hello. All right. Good morning, everybody. It's Steve. Welcome back. Hope you all had a great night, and welcome to the people that are just joining us this morning. So there's definitely two types of people here. There's the types that you guys woke up and did yoga and your fun run, and then there's the people like me who slept as long as possible and just got here. But either way, we're glad to have all of you here. And Steve, anything you want to say about last night?
You know what? It was an awesome day, and it was fun hanging out with a lot of you at the Barefoot Bar. And thank you for all the nice comments you've given Jeremy and myself and the other staff. It means a lot to us, more than anything else.
Yeah.
So it's awesome.
It really is a great weekend. Just so glad to have you guys here. So again, don't know us, you just showed up. Jeremy Pettis, Steve Edelman, both doctors at UCSD. Steve founded TCOID 30 years ago. And the way that today's going to work is our opening talk is meant to just kind of, whet your palate, so to speak, kind of high level overviews of what we think is cool in type 1 diabetes. And then we have a really good lineup of speakers that are going to kind of deeper depth on these topics. So if we say something and you're like, wait, I want to hear more about that, the chances are you're going to. So the morning is going to be kind of like dedicated talks that we're all here together. We have lunch. And then the afternoon, it's more kind of like pick and choose your adventure of different topics. We'll do little like breakout rooms. And then of course tonight we have our big party right back here with the Beatles band. And this room will be transformed into a completely different look with, dinner tables and belly bars and things like that. So it's going to be a great day.
Yeah, and when you look at the schedule, I mean, it's amazing how much information is going to be available today. And I should also mention, we are live videotaping this morning, Saturday morning, and that's for people that couldn't fly from, New Zealand and Lisbon, Portugal.
Yeah.
And it'll also be online. So if you see a lecture by Eden Miller, Bill Polonsky, David On, you can come back and watch it again.
All right, so let's get this party started. This is updates in type 1 diabetes and whatnot with Jeremy and Steve. So starting with, this is tradition now, at least quizzes about Steve and I. So when it comes to Steve and I, which of these is not true? And there's one answer, so don't shout it out, just be quiet, and just let's go through these answers and see what we got. Okay, so we were both diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at age 15. We were both endocrinologists at UC San Diego. We both did our training at UCSD, meaning our educations. We both work at TCOID. We both love donuts, Rocky Road ice cream, and rabbits. We want a cure for type 1 diabetes. And finally, we have both won gold medals in fencing at the Olympics. Anybody have an idea which is not true? So it absolutely is this one, because I don't really care for rabbits. I'm not a rabbit guy. I love donuts and Rocky Road ice cream. This guy loves rabbits. But Steve and I, people don't know this, but we took home gold. There's me and Steve fencing, and so that was a big moment for us.
I pulled my groin muscle.
Yeah.
Look at that.
It was a good move. Yeah. It was quite it's some kind of haunted mansion that we were performing. But anyway, so that's about us. All right, so, we're going to get into all the good stuff that's happening or coming with type 1 diabetes. But we got to start with kind of the bad stuff. Why are we here? If type 1 diabetes was a breeze, this conference wouldn't exist. So it's kind of level setting in terms of where we are in the country and the world with type 1 diabetes care. And here's some of the facts. So when you look at people in the United States, only about 2 out of 10, 20% of people get their A1C less than 7. So if you're one of these people, your A1C is not exactly where you want it to be. This is the majority. And this is a challenging disease. We all know that. The problems go on and on. It's difficult to count carbs. You might not have access to the latest medications or the endocrinologist you want to see. There's reasons why this is actually really difficult to achieve. So if you're struggling, you're actually in the majority. I think there can be this perception, sometimes especially in these conferences like this, that everybody's doing fantastic. Guess what? I check Steve's labs. He checks mine too. Our A1C is definitely not always where we want it to be. He actually makes me look at his labs first before he does because he's like worried about it and I have to break it to him. This is an interesting one that, 2 out of 3 people with type 1 diabetes now are either overweight or obese. And looking at this crowd, I think you guys don't really fit in that. This is a very thin, good-looking group. But people with type 1 diabetes are gaining weight. Just like the rest of America, guess what? We can eat the same kind of crappy fast food. Taking insulin makes it difficult sometimes to exercise. You can have a low blood sugar, which makes you eat, tons of peanut butter at 2 a.m. That's not good for the waistline. So there's reasons that type 1s can gain weight.
Yeah, absolutely. And now that we have these automated insulin delivery systems, it keeps your blood sugars normal, but at the expense of maybe a little bit more insulin. One of the areas that Jeremy researches is insulin resistance in type 1s. We always thought it was always type 2s.
So, and then we still have problems with hypoglycemia. 1 out of 20 people will go to the ER with a bad low. So we talked about making sure you have glucagon with you. This can still be really scary.
That's why we have an ambulance out front in case. We expect one of you to pass out during Jeremy's lecture.
Steve actually did have to give glucagon to somebody during
CPR.
CPR and glucagon, yeah.
Yeah.
And then DKA is still a problem. So this isn't to bum everybody out. It's just that also there is a perception, I think, in the community, especially in the research world, of, well, what's the problem? These pumps have just solved everything, right? You just wear these pumps, they can take care of your blood sugars, and what's the big deal? Well, it's still very difficult, even with the latest and greatest technology. You still got to count carbs and take insulin, and it's easy to kind of get it wrong. And when you do, your blood sugars go too high or too low. You get on the roller coaster. It's frustrating, which is what this looks like in real time. So here's me the other day, and this wasn't even a bad day at all, but my blood sugars, cruising along. God forbid I ate breakfast. I took some insulin for breakfast. My blood sugars went a little high, just a little over 200. But you see that, your alarm goes off, you get mad, you do what we call rage bullets. Your pump recommends 0.2 units. You're like, 22 sounds a lot better, and so you do that. And then guess what? You start going low. So you have to, stuff your face with whatever. And once you start eating, it's really difficult to stop, right? And then you blast off, your blood sugar goes high, and you just repeat. So this is what all those statistics, this is what it looks like in real life, right? And buried in here is the emotion and the difficult psychology that goes along with type 1 diabetes of, man, this is literally minute to minute, the highs, the lows. It can be very frustrating. And even you guys that are like, my A1C is 6.5 and I never get low, doesn't mean you're having a good time. This is still difficult, so it's a tough disease.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had a patient in clinic that says, something's wrong with my insulin. It doesn't work fast enough. Oh, really? Yeah. We never really knew that until we had CGM. But, when you give insulin, your subcutaneous tissue is just not the same as from your pancreas. It's very frustrating.
So cheer up, it's good news time. And these guys seem like they're having a good time.
That's Jeremy.
Yeah. See, I'm a dog person. I don't like rabbits, if you guys missed that question. All right, so I have this slide in here just to it doesn't really fit, but sometimes you just got to say F it. We work so hard to control our blood sugars and do this all the time. And what do we want? With all this work, what do we really want at the end of the day? We want nothing. We want nothing to happen. That is our goal. We don't want to go low. We don't want to go high. We don't want complications. We're just trying to achieve nothing. And that, you can't win at that game, right? So you got to realize that this is, sometimes you just got to say F it. And there's different ways to do it. You can say F it when your blood sugars go high, or you can just say, you know what, for the weekend, I'm going to say F it. And that just means that I'm going to give myself a break. That I am going to go high, I am going to go low, and it's not the end of the world. It really is more of a marathon than a sprint with type 1 diabetes. Steve and I go high, go low quite frequently. I follow his blood sugars, he follows mine. Mostly to give each other crap, but we do. So say F it. The other day I ate one of these acai bowls.
He deserves it for eating that.
Which is, it's just this goop we make here in San Diego that, it's acai with granola and all kinds of carbs. And, then I had some pizza and some beer, and my blood sugar went high, and I just said, F it, and I had a donut. So,
Or two.
yeah. And guess what? I'm still here. I'm a doctor. I'm doing all right. So these things like happen. So give yourself, a break every once in a while. All right. So what is hot in type 1 diabetes? There's 3 categories we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about technology, kind of other medications for type 1 diabetes beyond insulin, and then these kind of like cure-based approaches. And again, this is going to be a very broad overview. So we're going to start with technology. And Steve loves that I always have to show this sophisticated chart. And you can tell it's a sophisticated chart because it says right there, sophisticated chart. And if you guys are over here. And
my favorite slide.
These are changes in my diabetes regimen. And Steve could have something very similar. Since I was diagnosed in 1994 to, let's say, 2025 now. And it's gone like this. And if Steve's was here, honestly, it would be, out to the 70s, it would just still be a flat line. Like, nothing really changed for the longest time. And now it's like, it's really hard to keep up with. We got the Libre 3 Plus, and that integrates with this pump, and then, like this Dexcom, and but that's good news for us, right? Of all the different options we have with technology, but also just a reason that you guys have to keep up on it, because it's very easy for even us to fall behind, or certainly your providers. So going in and advocating for yourself with the pump or the CGM that you might want. And what's the goal of this? It's really simple. We want better diabetes control, and we don't want to work that hard, right? That's really it. Sure, thank you for that.
These hybrid closed loop systems, they're all working towards the same thing. No more bolusing before meals, no more meal announcements, just put it on.
Yeah.
And that we're getting closer and closer to that. So that's exciting. It's not a cure, but Jeremy's going to be talking about the cure tomorrow.
And to put this like an actual, like what this looked like through my life. So I was diagnosed in 1994, and I didn't realize at the time that I was like lucky in that I was given a blood sugar meter. This was like pretty soon before this. It was like urine testing. That's what Steve, we have a slide to talk about that. But I always make the joke that in the hospital, this was the meter I was given. And I love that they called it the One Touch Basic. Like when they made it, they're like, this thing kind of sucks. Like it's not the One Touch, like super cool, zippy device. It's like, it's basic. It's bottom of the barrel. And if you guys remember, you would put a little drop of blood, not a little, big old dollop of blood on there. And it would take like 60 seconds to give you a reading. That reading was usually error. And you would have to take this thing off and clean it. And
well, some of us remember the strips, the AccuCheck. You had to put a drop of blood and then wipe it off in 1 minute, and then another minute, compare it to a color chart. Yeah. So he's complaining. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So this was it. It took a minute, but like when you're hiding this under your desk in high school, that minute seems like 3 hours. And then a couple years go by. And we had these big advancements. Right now the meter is a little bit smaller. The best thing is that it had this memory function. And the best part about that is you could furiously go through your readings when you're in your doctor's office and write them into your freaking notebook that we were supposed to keep and write down, like all this like
stuff. I thought
stuff.
You made them up.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot my meter today, but here's my book, all written with the same color pen.
Yeah. Yeah, you could tell when it was a real logbook. I had blood smears all over it and peanut butter. But so 2 years go by, not much happens. Then literally like a decade, right? And now guess what? We get smaller meters. Yeah, they take less blood. They take 4 or 5 seconds to give a result. And Steve, what's the joke you always make about the number?
Yeah, always, here? Because when you look at the advertisements for these meters, the numbers are always normal. And I'd love to have a picture that says 285, and then a little voice comes out and goes, damn, or shit, But, come on, this reality. I told the meter companies, come on, I beg you, print an advertisement that says 295.
Yeah. Well, so that was the big advance.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
You see that glucose strip? They are all over this vest that Chantalou made. There's 2 of these. You saw me walking around with it yesterday. I will. And these are used. These are the strips. And she told me they're used, so I've now been tested for syphilis, hepatitis, and HIV. And I should get the results at the end of the conference. Thanks, Shannon.
All right, so in 2010, like the first Dexcom that I used was called a 7 Plus. You know, at the time was just like a huge breakthrough, but you know, it only lasted 3 days. It was very inaccurate. So obviously this has come a long way, and just kind of like skipping ahead, that every year in terms of like CGM stuff, there's been advances. And they've generally been, you know, improving, longer life, more accurate. I could do the same thing with the Libre or the different sensors, but this technology is really just kind of like ramped up. And it's so great when people are, you know, newly diagnosed now that they may literally never check their blood sugars. I mean, like those days are kind of going away, thankfully. But this has been a huge boon for us. And
this just touches the surface, too.
This is Steve's slide that he wanted to put in here. So how did you start, Steve?
Yeah, I started testing my urine with a little chemistry kit with, you know, 10 drops water, 5 drops urine. You put the pill in, you held it up to a chart, and the only thing you put in your logbook is +1, +2, +3, +4. And so none of these things on the lower left part of the slide. So I've experienced it all. And Jeremy always says I used, you know, bamboo needles for my insulin. That hurt.
Yeah. So things are improving, certainly. And then, you know, and then on the pump side, same kind of thing. This has been, you know, more recent, that we had the 670G, which we talked about last night, then, you know, the Tandem pump, and the Omnipod 5, and the iLet, and Medtronic 780G, and then we talked about, we just now have this new twist pump, which is, you know, just released now. So we're getting new iterations of this with the goal, as Steve said, of you know, ultimately trying to eliminate us from having to do anything. When I look at CGM downloads of people on these systems, blood sugars are great overnight, right? When you're sleeping, you're not eating, you're not doing anything, the pump can figure out, and then you wake up and everything goes to hell, right? Because then we're in control and we got to figure out the carbs and all the, like, you know, stressors of life. And people always ask, what's the best pump? And there's no like answer to that. Really, literally every single one of these has a plus, a minus, depending on if you want tubing, if not, how much control over these different things. So
yeah, we got 2 great workshops. One for beginners, for those of you that really don't know much about these systems. Then we have one for advanced. And I always say this, that these are all good systems. I've seen people do horrible on every one of these, not many, but I do. And then I see people that do extremely well on every single one of these. You got to find the one that works best for you, your lifestyle.
yeah.
It's nice to have choices too, it really is.
Oh, so we showed some of my speed dating videos yesterday. I think we showed me dating Medtronic and the Twist. This was the first one featuring our lovely Michelle Day, who you've already met doing some of her announcements and just being a butterfly around the conference. So this is her being the Omnipod 5 and my date with her.
This is X-rated. X-rated.
Oh, please have a seat. So tell me about yourself.
I don't have tubing on right now.
Tubing on?
Yep, you heard me right.
Gosh, that's so progressive of you. So tell me more.
Well, without the tubing tying me down, you can put me pretty much anywhere on your body. Back of the arm, oh yes. Stomach, I got it. Side of the leg,
Anywhere?
well, anywhere within reason, of course.
Right, of course. Well, tell me more.
I'm also super adaptive. I play nice with Dexcom and Abbott CGMs. And I can adjust your insulin every 5 minutes. So all you need to worry about is being you, darling.
Wow, I mean, you've certainly made a case for yourself, so we just might be in touch.
And if you have any type 2 friends, let them know that I can play with them too. Why should type 1s have all the fun? Boop.
So that was our Michelle. She totally crushed it. So yeah, please check out that on our website. And we have David on, who is going to be talking all about this in detail, the pros, the cons of different systems. We've done podcasts on this topic. We've done videos with David, but we're really glad to have him speaking today at 11 a.m.
And he'll be at the workshops as well.
So this is a new advance in technology, continuous ketone monitoring. So this is something that Abbott is supposed to be releasing literally any day now. That'll be their Libre 3. But in addition to measuring glucose, it'll let you know what your ketones are. And you don't need to know your ketones all the time, but you certainly need to know them if they're becoming into a dangerous level, you're getting close to DKA. So it's kind of the same thing that you've been wearing, but measuring this other thing, which was a real kind of cool breakthrough.
Yeah, and David's going to cover that in more detail as well.
But I do have this here, is that, I understand measuring ketones, but why do we care? And that's going to get into my next section on other medications. And we're going to talk about a drug called SGLT2 inhibitors, like Farxiga and Jardiance, that we use all the time in people with type 2 diabetes. Fantastic medications, help their pills that help people lose weight, help their heart, their kidneys. But they raise ketone levels in people with type 1 diabetes. So that's why they're not approved for us to use. And the community now kind of thinks with this device, it might be a way to kind of unlock these medicines so that we can use them safely in type 1 diabetes.
Yeah, people's pump lines come out, you have sick days, so there's a lot of reasons why it could help alert you to impending DK. You can treat it at home, never have to go to the hospital.
So that brings me to other meds. We're leaving technology behind. Again, David On's going to talk about that. Technology has just been a huge benefit to all of us, for sure. So these meds I just mentioned, it's a mouthful. SGLT2 inhibitors have been revolutionary meds. Farxiga, Jardiance, Invokana. You've heard of these meds. You've seen the commercials. But again, data keeps coming out that they help prevent heart attacks, strokes, help preserve the kidney function, help people avoid going on to dialysis, things like that. And people with and without diabetes, and help people lose a little bit of weight. So these really, you hate to use the term magic pills, but these have been a breakthrough for a lot of people.
Well tolerated too, 1 pill a day.
Yeah. And so you've seen these. It's usually people dancing, like all the Jardiance commercials, it seems like they're dancing in a mall or whatever, they're at work, and all of a sudden spontaneously, sometimes you got to dance. And,
if you can't dance before, you can dance after you start them.
So these are familiar, like they're in our orbit. We've been using them for a long time, and we really think that with these ketone monitors, that will be to use them in type 1s. So I have this it's been this desert, because people always focus on type 1s. You just need insulin. But now we're learning that yes, we always need insulin. But what if you could take a medication or something else with it to help blood sugars, weight, heart, kidneys, all those kinds of things?
Yeah, it's exciting. We're trying to get these other therapies. We're going to get there. Jeremy and I are pushing big time.
This is a little clip we have on these meds called these SGLT2 inhibitors. So let's play that, Eric. Sad news for people living with type 1 diabetes. The FDA recently denied a second request to approve sotagliflozin, an SGLT inhibitor for people living with type 1. They cited that the risk of DKA that's sometimes associated with these drugs is still too great. Thus, type 1s remain without access to these critical medications that have proven cardio, renal, and metabolic benefits. So this is a real loss for type 1s, and something that Steve and I are actually very passionate about. In fact, and this is true, Steve made the opening arguments to the FDA as to why this drug should be approved. Yep, that's Steve in front of the FDA. Now, we also have a clip of the FDA's reaction to Steve's impassioned plea for approval. Let's take a look at that now.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Wow, Steve, that response was a little overkill.
Yeah, it hurt.
To get the reaction of the public after this bombshell at the FDA, Newsy News sent me out to hit the streets and see what regular Americans are saying about this verdict in our new and hopefully recurring segment, Jeremy Hits the Streets.
Jeremy hit the streets.
So here I am, people, hitting the streets to find out how regular folks feel about this recent denial of sotagliflozin in type 1 diabetes. Oh, here comes somebody now, a totally real, not planted person. Excuse me, sir. Are you in the medical field by any chance?
No, I'm actually an architect with Vandelay Industries.
Oh, do you know George? Well, anyways, do you have any experience with diabetes?
No, not at all.
Well, perfect. How do you feel about the FDA denying sotagliflozin for people with type 1 diabetes?
Well, thank you for asking, because I think it's total. I mean, give the type 1s a break.
Well, I mean, there you have it. Regular folks outraged by this recent decision. Back to you in the newsroom, Steve.
All right. It's great. So just giving the idea that, yes, like there is a push now to get these meds approved, and I think this will happen relatively soon. So, you know, yes, we're working on this, but a little bit on GLP-1s like Ozempic, Mounjaro. You can't turn on the news without hearing about it. And they have studied these drugs in type 1 diabetes. There was a big study just released in the New England Journal. They took 72 adults with type 1 diabetes on hybrid closed loop systems, put them on Ozempic for 6 months, and their A1C came down a little, 0.3, but this group lost about 20 pounds. Their time in range increased by 9%. So we are really working, like Steve and I prescribe these all the time for our type 1s, and there are tricks to get them covered. And we actually have, that gets my Odang Award. It's a very rare Odang, so there it is. And we have Eden Miller that's going to be talking about this. I just had to put this from Mean Girls up here. But about how to use these medications. Should you be on one of these oral medications, these pills, SGLT2s? If you want to take Ozempic, how can you get it? Maybe you get it covered to help you lose weight and you don't get it officially for type 1 diabetes, little tricks like that.
Yep.
Yeah, so that'll be a talk we're all excited about. Can't skip over Afrezza and inhaled insulin. If you haven't heard about it, please hear about it. They have a booth here. Why is it cool? This is basically just how quick it works. The white circles, that as soon as you inhale it, this is compared to kind of like our regular injectable insulins, Humalog or Novolog, it works immediately and it gets out of the system very, very quickly. So this is a nice, like, sharp tool to have in your toolbox. Those stubborn highs, you just can't get off that ledge of 250 or whatever it might be. And you can take it in combo with pumps and things like that.
The other thing I'll say real quickly is I know many of you have talked to me about you can't get it. And I would go talk to Josh and others at the Mankai booth because there are tricks to get, legal tricks to get it approved. And they do have a cash pay that's $100 a month. So anyway, if you can't get it, if your doctor doesn't prescribe it, get another frickin' doctor. Because a lot of people are quite ignorant. Ask the Mankind folks if you want it and you haven't been able to get it.
So yeah, this is just showing how quick it works, how quick it gets out of the system so you can dose it again. And it really is a nice tool, like I said. And then we mentioned this yesterday, make sure you have a prescription for glucagon. This is a nasal one called Baqsimi. There's an auto-injector pen called Gvoke. Both are stable for 2 years. So have one of these in your car, in your work bag. And importantly, tell somebody where it is. This isn't always for you to use, but like if I passed out or something, my partner would need to know where the glucagon is to get it and use it for me. So that's part 2. So part 1 is get it. Part 2 is kind of tell people where it is. And this is fun because you can get a glucagon kit, which is a vial and syringe. So people do play around with like mini dosing glucagon, taking a few units of glucagon before exercise or something to avoid lows. It's not an official approved indication. We did a whole podcast on this topic. Just it's kind of something kind of cool to know about, and you can ask people how they do it.
Yep.
All right, so we got to keep moving here. So ending with cure-based approaches, and that's going to be the last talk I give the whole weekend where I go into more detail on this. But just to say a few things, we have a treatment that's been approved called Tzield. They have a booth, kind of like the first booth when you walk in, to delay the onset of type 1 diabetes by up to 3 years. So like we said, it's too late for us that have it, but for your relatives that you like, you can get them screened. And if they actually show antibodies that they're at risk for this, they can get this medication to delay this by up to 3 years. And for me, 3 days would be worth it, not having type 1, but 3 years is a big deal.
But to be fair, when you say up to 3 years, that's the average.
Yeah.
Some people that took this never got that type 1. Other people got it less than 3 years, but on average. But we know what you're talking about.
And we want to build on this, obviously,
yeah, this is
right?
just the beginning.
This is our first approved drug that actually does something to the disease. Everything we're working on, CGM, pumps, et cetera, is really kind of a Band-Aid to control blood sugars. This is something actually targeting the immune system to help offset the disease, which is fantastic.
This is huge. The first disease-modifying drug. Very first one. So it's just the tip of the iceberg. And there's a ton of other technology that you'll be talking about.
So this is a great website, screenfortype1.com. You can send it right now, text it to your your kids, brothers, sisters, parents, those kinds of things on how to get screened for type 1 diabetes. And so everybody call your family members that you like. And then importantly, we have Adam Schefter. So if people are, in the sports world, definitely know him from being a sports analyst, very well-known figure. That's going to be talking about his journey. His wife has type 1 diabetes and what that experience was like. Wouldn't it have been nice to know sooner? And has become a real advocate for pushing this idea of let's get more and more people screened for type 1 so we can find out sooner.
We did a great podcast with him as well, so look out for that on our website.
So he'll be up here at 11:30, so we got an action-packed morning to hear all about these things. And then tomorrow, this is me talking about all these kind of like cure-based stuff. And again, we've been promised these things for a zillion years, right? We're like the cure's right around the corner. Steve, when you were diagnosed, how long did they tell you before we had a cure?
10 to 15 years.
Yeah, 10 to 15 years. Guess what they told me? 10 to 15
So
years.
what is it now?
It's about 10 to 15 years. Yeah. So,
But he really means it.
But there are some actually exciting developments in this area. I used to hate to give this talk at the end of the conference because it's like, well, hang in there. But now there are some things that are kind of more like right around the corner.
Right around the corner.
Yeah. And just a shout out to my research group. This is me in the front, and Schaefer's right behind you. Who actually is the world's smartest endocrinologist. So maybe next time, Schaefer, we should have you up
I'm
front.
not.
But I want to highlight these two folks. This is Todd and Antonia that are here with our research group. They have a booth. If anybody's interested in doing type 1 diabetes research, if you're local, kind of the Southern California-ish area, we have a lot of clinical trials going on that you can roll in, spend some time with our group. We have stuff, if treating hypoglycemia, a new liver-targeted insulin, targeting kidney disease, new medications. There's a number of different studies, and you've never been in clinical research. I do recommend it because you learn a lot about yourself. You get like really good care. You're seen frequently. So people that we have in the studies generally just do better because they're kind of involved with their diabetes and plugged in with our group. So I always end with this. And I can't say it enough because it takes usually, they say 7 times before somebody actually hears something. And here it is. Type 1s are living longer now than people without diabetes. So yes, that's worth a round of applause. And there are some caveats, right? You can't just throw your pump in the trash and walk out of here and be like, I'm gonna live forever. You gotta reasonably control your blood sugars. You gotta stay on top of it. Why is this true? Well, guess what? We think it's because of all the hard work that we're doing that pays off. Meaning, you guys probably interact with your healthcare providers more than non-diabetics. Should be on top of your blood pressure, on your cholesterol. Everybody here thinks about every single food item they put in their mouth. You're thinking about my exercise and your kind of like health. And those things do matter in terms of longevity. So this is a message of hope that these goals that you're doing, that working on achieving nothing, does pay off. That there is, some, some longevity, and also just being a part of this community. I think this is, sometimes I say getting type 1 diabetes is the best thing that ever happened to me. Today I feel like that. 2 days ago, maybe not. But it is a great community to be a part of, and people are doing very well. Just look around this room, living well with this disease.
The study we referred to, if your A1C was below 8, you lived as long as anybody else. That's different than getting, complications at an early stage. So it wasn't like you had to have your A1C less than 7 for longevity. So that's an important distinction. But nonetheless, the world is different now. And look at this room. And you're right.
And the last thing I'll say is I've had the single most common question I've gotten since last night is, what's the deal with the thing you said about wrinkles? Is that true? The people with type 1 diabetes have less wrinkles? And I actually looked it up. And it said, the results are kind of conflicting, but there are some studies showing that type 1s have less wrinkles, and the results or the reasons are unknown. So we don't know, but it seems like this is something that happens. And if you look around, check people's faces out when you talk to them, and see what you think. But with that, we're gonna step aside to get kind of like into the actual lectures. Thank you so much again for being here. It's a quick round of applause for Steve and me.
Bill, come on up.
I think you're going to introduce Bill, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. All right. Where is the famous Bill Polanski? Here he comes. Are you all mic'd up? All
Give
right.
me that.
All right, I'm going to give a quick intro of Bill, my good friend and colleague, who spoke at the very first TCOID in 1995. And he is the first recipient of someone who has the honorary diabetes degree, someone that doesn't have diabetes but knows what it's like to have diabetes. Tricia Santos and Ian Bloomer, they're both here, and they are the other two recipients. And Bill, trained at all the great places, the Joslin Clinic, Yale, but basically has devoted his career to the behavioral issues and emotional issues of people with diabetes. And that's why he got the award. He doesn't even have diabetes, which really always impressed me. And he runs an organization, he started it, the founder, Behavioral Diabetes Institute, does a lot of stuff with TCOID, a lot of videotapes on our website, does a lot of stuff with his organizations. Bill, take it away.
Thank you, kind sir.
And tell them what you're doing this afternoon.
Okay. Good morning. Okay, thank you. What a lovely introduction. Steve, I've just thought about how I've known you for 32 years. And I'm going to show you a little short video about Steve shortly, which I hope will embarrass him, because I try to do that every time I get a chance to talk, and he's here. So as he mentioned, I'm a diabetes psychologist. I've done this for a very long time. And I've had a chance, really the honor, to work with many thousands of people who are living every day and often struggling with diabetes. I've also done a huge amount of research trying to understand the emotional, the psychosocial side of diabetes, to see how we can sort of help folks be more successful with diabetes, to feel less burdened by it. And really the goal has always been, I want every single person, and some of this is true for you right now, I want every single person living with type 1 diabetes right now to feel like this, in terms of the emotional side of diabetes. Like, I got this, no problem whatsoever. I want every single person with type 1 I ever meet, and all of you, to wake up in the morning and go, yeah, no problem. Another round of perfect blood sugars every day. I'm 100% time in range. Oh yeah, right? And the feeling that, over the course of time, I've got this, right? So now that's the goal. Now we know not everybody feels this way, but a lot of people, a lot of you have managed, especially as we've seen advances in technology, advances in knowledge, as you find good healthcare providers to work with, you move from often a place of feeling very disconsolate to feeling like, no, I can really be successful. And I asked Steve about this. I've watched him over the years to move from really the really limited and primitive technology that we used to have. I'm thinking how he and I still do a lot of bike riding. I mean, the beeping drove me crazy when we were riding, and now it never happens. I hope he's okay. But things have really dramatically changed. So when I asked Steve, I said, could you give me a sense? What's it like living with diabetes now in terms of how things have shifted for you, in terms of the emotional side of diabetes? He sent me this, And Steve, I have to say, you have never looked better. It really says something about how really remarkable and you look. But unfortunately, what we know, damn, that looks good, Steve. Congratulations. We know that not everybody feels this way. And we know that sometimes diabetes can be a real hassle, right? That this emotional side of diabetes can drag you down. And we know a lot about the different ways that can happen. We know if you're living with diabetes every day, if you heard what Jeremy said about, having to watch everything you eat and be aware of it, you can do it, but, it gets old, doesn't it? Anybody feel that way, by the way? Yeah, thank you. So you can get exhausted. We know it's easy to be discouraged when, despite your best efforts, the results don't seem to work as well. Like, how can this be? I ate perfect. I did everything I was supposed to do. Look at these crazy numbers, right? So it's easy to get discouraged, or you run into complications, all sorts of ways in which it can really begin to beat you down. We know there's often a sense of shame, even now, a sense of like, I'm a bad person, I'm broken, people aren't going to be seeing me differently. We know it's easy just to feel despairing and hopeless and concerned that this disease is going to get me. I mean, you heard Jeremy mention about how people with type 1 are living longer and longer and longer lives. I mean, geez, look around the room, right? We have how many people here have been living with type 1 for 50 years or longer. We're going to get overwhelmed by all you folks with type 1. because you live so long. And we know, of course, the worry about lows and fear of hypoglycemia, which can be a big concern. So, and it isn't just those folks in this room with type 1, it's those of you in this room who care about people with type 1. And again, Steve and Jeremy refer to you as type 3s. Sometimes I like to refer to you as the diabetes police. And as many of you who've been here before know, the diabetes police are people who have decided whether you like it or not, they're going to help you manage your diabetes. They're always coming from a place of love and caring, but it can be problematic at times, right? So we're going to talk about that in one of the sessions I'm going to be doing this afternoon for those of you, for all of you type 3s, for those of you who care about someone of type 1 but don't have it. So, well, why has all this happened? Why are there such a profound and common emotional experience of living with diabetes that can really be tough? And by the way, we know from all the studies we've done around the world, when we do formal questionnaires, I'm going to show you one in a minute, where we ask people, to what degree is diabetes really a problem for you? To what degree is it an emotional issue that's burdensome? We ask people, can you tell me one thing about diabetes that drives you crazy? Or more than one. We find that, again, more than 80% of people on this planet will say, oh yeah, I got some things to tell you. It's not weird if you're feeling overwhelmed by diabetes at times. It's not weird if you're feeling discouraged and down. It's freaking normal. And we understand a lot of it is because of this, which is diabetes is a job, right? It's a job you didn't volunteer for. There's no pay. There's no vacations. You get to do it kind of forever. And it's understandable that that might get old over the course of time, or at least on occasion, right? And we know that in the extreme form, it can really lead to what we call diabetes burnout, where you just go, that's it. I've had enough. I'm out of here, right? If it's just for one day, Jeremy might call it the F-it day. If it goes on too long, that could be a big problem. In fact, we've been thinking a lot about this F-it day phenomena that Jeremy was speaking about. And one of the things we've been trying to figure out, maybe I'll get help from you guys today. We know that when you learned you had type 1 diabetes, odds are good someone had the opportunity to talk to you about what are called sick day rules. Remember sick day rules? What to do if you're feeling crappy, you can't keep food down, want to stay hydrated, how you want to deal with your insulin. But we're pretty knowledgeable about sick day rules, but we never talk about fun day rules. And I think we need a set of fun day rules for those F-it days. Anyway, when we think about what are the reasons that diabetes can be so burdensome for so many people from time to time and really drag you down, a lot of it is how we have learned about diabetes and how we think about it. So if you think you have to be perfect with your diabetes, that means you're going to end up feeling like a failure. If you feel like whatever you're doing isn't good enough, maybe you've been told that actually. If you feel like your life is going to be cut short by type 1. And we were at a meeting just a few weeks ago over at TCOID, and there was a young man who had been diagnosed not too long ago, and he said, oh yeah, when I was diagnosed, my doctor told me my life was going to be, I'm going to lose at least 10 years because of now that I had type 1 diabetes. And it just infuriates me. That's not true. That may be a mean value from a single study, but that's not representative of what we really know from large databases like the Swedish National Registry and more, which I wish I had time to talk about. It's your fault if your numbers aren't good. Really? We know that's not reasonable either because diabetes just doesn't cooperate sometimes. Or if you feel like you're just a burden to others. All those things can contribute to this negative emotional side of diabetes. So how do we understand this better and what do we do about it? Well, first of all, we've all spent years developing questionnaires to try to really quantify and understand this. And our most recent version is online. This is a free website called diabetesdistress.org. And I want to tell you about our most recent questionnaire called the T1DDAS, which stands for the Diabetes Distress Assessment System. If you're really bored listening to me, you could open your phone. You can go to this site right now and fill this out. And I'm going to show you what happens, or I'm going to tell you about this. But the bottom line, you fill this out, it gives you sort of this overall score to tell you whether distress is a big issue for you or not. And then it tells you about your, what we call source scores, like what's contributing to what's so tough about diabetes. And there's really 10 of those sources that we've identified from our research around the country and around the world. It doesn't mean these are the only 10, but these are the big ones that have emerged from our research. So number one is just management difficulties. Like, ugh, I'm so sick of this. You can see the example over there on the right side of the screen at the top. One example of that dimension is people say, you know, I get angry at myself for not managing my diabetes better. I just feel like I'm not always doing good enough. By the way, I just should see by a vote, how many of you would say, yeah, that's sometimes a problem for me? Anybody? Yeah, like 2 or 3 of you? Give me a break. Come on. Again, fear of hypoglycemia. It says hypoglycemia is the second one, but fear of hypoglycemia. And again, you see the example. I feel so scared of going low that I avoid things in my life. And it's really this fear of hypoglycemia that is one of the major reasons that everyone doesn't have awesome, perfect blood sugars all the time, which is understandable. You want to be safe, but fear can become too much. Then there's the interpersonal challenges, the third point on this slide. I feel angry when others tell me what I should do to manage my diabetes. Again, the diabetes police issue. Again, I hate to say it, but a big problem is healthcare providers. The fourth thing on this line, right? When it comes to medical care, you can see the example. It upsets me that I am mostly on my own with my diabetes. My healthcare provider, my physician, nurse practitioner, they may or may not be a pleasant person who even listens to me if they have time, but it's a few minutes, maybe a couple times a year. I'm on my own. And then there's, I mentioned already about shame, the last point of this slide. I often feel ashamed or embarrassed when other people know about my diabetes. Anybody had that experience of being treated differently? Oh, you have type 1. I know all about that. Let me tell you. Let me give you some advice. Have you heard about that tree in the Amazon and you just eat it and your diabetes goes away? Oh my God. And that's just the first 5. Here's a few more. Then there's, of course, worries about complications. Again, I worry that my life will be cut short by diabetes. That's understandable because you probably have heard that over and over and over again. One of the most common marketing campaigns from some of our major diabetes organizations is, did you know that diabetes is the leading cause of blindness? That's not true. It's actually out-of-control diabetes that's the leading cause of blindness. Well-controlled diabetes is, some of you have heard me say over and over again, well-controlled diabetes is the leading cause of nothing, right? But we don't talk about that enough. Then there's financial worries. Oh my goodness, right? It upsets me that I have to pay so much for my diabetes care, medications, and medicines and supplies. That continues to be a big issue. There's the lack of resources. I worry about how hard it is to get to my healthcare appointments or my pharmacy, right? One of the biggest contributors to making type 1 difficult is poverty, right? Or no health insurance, or living in America with this fragmented healthcare system. There's the technology challenges, right? I feel overwhelmed by all the information I get from my devices. And again, the sense of feeling like a burden to others. I feel like I'm a burden to others because of my type 1. Now, this isn't everybody, but these are just the idea of the different things that can contribute to why diabetes can drive you nuts, right? So if any of those sound familiar, you are normal. Again, the vast majority of people would look at one of these or more of these areas and go, oh yeah. So we understand that. But the real issue, of course, is what to do about it. And I want to tell you something I haven't ever talked about before because it's from a new research study that was published just last year that I've been thinking about because it really surprised me and I'm still kind of wrapping my head around it. That when we think about how you can help yourself to deal with the negative emotions of diabetes or how we help each other, we usually focus on one of two things. Number one is we think about how we can help people deal with behavior, to give them good advice about changes you can make to be more successful. Maybe you should try a hybrid closed loop system, for example, right? We think about ways in which we can, again, recommend and change actions or behavior. And the other thing that we don't think about enough is how we commiserate and how we show ourselves or others compassion, self-compassion. And it's this idea of how we show compassion that is something that we have ignored. And in our most recent study, we realized this is probably the biggest thing we could do and that we've made a terrible mistake by not focusing on it enough. So if this works, I want to show you a little video. Some of you may have seen this, that I think captures these two sides, and then we'll talk about it briefly. It's 90 seconds. You ready? Here we go. Let's see if it works.
It's just, there's all this pressure, and sometimes it feels like it's right up on me, and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
You do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
See, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See,
out.
you're not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like, there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
That sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Come on. If you would just...
Don't.
Try to see things my way. Do I have to keep on walking till I can go on?
Sound familiar, by the way, Taylor? So let me tell you something surprising about that. So I think I've watched that little video 100 times, and I always think, what is her problem? You know, I mean, geez, just take the frickin' nail out of your head. But what I've realized, and really what our research shows, is when it comes to dealing with the emotional side of diabetes, what's really important is, in fact, what she wanted, and in fact, what that fellow actually finally said, which is, wow, that sounds really, really hard. And it's so easy to forget about that. I want to rip that frickin' nail out of your head. And it's this sense of self-compassion that has been ignored, that I think I've ignored. And if we're going to really get to the point of pulling that nail out of her head or helping people make positive changes in how they manage diabetes so it can feel less overwhelming, we start with compassion. We have to start by saying it out loud. And we have to start by doing it with ourselves. And it made me think about how many hundreds of people I've met who come in and say their biggest issue is they're having lots of lows. They're type 1, having a lot of lows. And they're typically having lots of lows because they get so upset anytime they have a blood sugar over 180. It's out of the green zone. Oh my God. And it isn't wrong that they want to respond, but their response is so about them being a bad person and them it's the emotion of that that's really driving them. So let me give you an example of how this works. So here's Thea. And Thea was asked, so tell us about some recent experience that was really aggravating for you. And she said this, you know, I went out to dinner with friends, but had a very low blood sugar at the restaurant. Everyone noticed. Oh, I hate that. And were concerned. The purpose of the dinner was to meet a friend's new boyfriend, but instead all the attention went to me and my low blood sugar. And so Thea was asked, well, what was that, what was that like for you? What were your thoughts about that? Well, oh yeah, now people are going to pity me because I have type 1 diabetes. Great. How'd you feel about that? Well, I felt a little scared, but mostly embarrassed. I felt like I had been careless. I felt ashamed. And what does that mean to you when you really think about it? It takes some time sometimes to talk about this. Well, it means I'm broken and I'm a burden. And it really sent her into a tailspin. So when we think about self-compassion, it meant thinking about not trying to solve things immediately with her. And this, I'm going to encourage you to think about doing this for yourself. It's not about trying to solve that, like, well, what can I do to make sure I never have a low when I go out to dinner? Which is not a bad idea, but let's not go there at first. I'm not trying to fix anything. It really is first thinking about who is my internal best friend forever. Who is that? Imagine I had one, right? If it was inside of me. What would that person say to me about that aggravating event I had, and who would be kind and understanding and helpful? Think about that for yourself. Who is my internal best friend forever? Who would be kind to me and say what, in truth, I'd love to hear? And when I think about that best friend forever, and this is the idea of self-compassion, for me, and I'm with Jeremy in terms of being a dog lover, bunnies, no big deal, but dogs, I'm there. It's having that good friend who's really rooting for you and on your side. So what would that mean? Let me get back to this. And so what we do, and what we did with Thea, as I say, is to really not just imagine it, but to write it down. What would that kind, understanding, and helpful response to be? This is what we did in this recent study. And what she wrote was this. Yeah, having lows is, it's a part of living with type 1. My diabetes sometimes requires a bit of help or concern from others. I have people who care about me and are glad to help me when I need it. And for her, that was a matter of, she needed to do that so that you can move on to think about anything else to do. And we sometimes forget about this idea of giving yourself some grace, giving yourself some kindness and some compassion. And I really want to encourage you all to think about that in the way I've been thinking about this over the past month since the study was first published, to realize how powerful and important that really is. Now, when we think about this idea of compassion, of making room, just like you saw in that little video, when the guy, as painful as it was for himself, finally said, yeah, this must be really hard for you with that nail in your head. It's not just about self-compassion, right? It's about how we do this for others. It's about compassion for other people. Now, I have to look at, since I have no idea of timing, how are we doing here? Oh, we have like no time, so I don't have to worry about that. So my original idea is if I had lots of time, I was going to make you all do this terrible thing and all stand up and find someone you don't know and do this with each other, but there's no time for that. But I really want you to hopefully think about doing that with each other over the course of the next day and tomorrow. Almost everybody in this room understands this experience with type 1. Almost everybody has been there. There's a number of you who aren't particularly shy. I'm hoping, at least for you guys, you'll reach out to say hello to someone in this room you don't know, and ask them, tell me what's one thing about diabetes that's driving you nuts? And listen for the answer without saying, maybe I should pull that nail out of your head. But to think about, what's the compassionate response? To basically be able to say, yeah, welcome to the boat, welcome to my boat, right? This sucks. This could be tough. And we can do okay. But it's that compassion piece that I keep forgetting about. And hopefully you haven't either. We can do a lot with that. So I think I'm supposed to stop. So I want to just say thanks for listening. And one last thing, I'm going to be doing another program group for those of you who have type 1 later, where we're going to just completely focus on the emotional side of diabetes. We'll get into a lot more details, and I'll get to hear more of your stories, what to do about it. But thank you, Dr. Ahmed. And by the way, you never looked better than in that tutu.
Oh, thank you, Bill. All right. Bill never disappoints. Bill, your slides have gotten so much cooler lately, too. Who's helping you? All right. It's my pleasure to introduce Eden Miller. Eden Miller, who I met in the last just couple of years. I've seen her at advisory board meetings. I've heard her speak. And she is an incredible woman. She got type 1 when she was in medical school at the age of 24. And it's really funny. She met her husband, who's also into diabetes, on a blind date. If you're a diabetic, don't go on blind dates. There's it's like going on an intimate date or something like that. I'm going on a kidney failure date. And Eden is interesting is the fact she's not only general medicine, but diabetes, and she has a specialty in obesity. She's been in Bend, Oregon for 32 years, and I'm going to stop talking and let her tell you about in more detail that Jeremy and I just touched on. And she also is involved in the Q&A session, and she's very approachable. Come on up to her during the conference, give her a hug, ask her anything you like.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for coming out.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all. This is my first one at one with all of you onesies. And I'm so excited. And so yesterday I got here a little bit early, got the lay of the land, walked around, kind of kicked the dust off my feet, came up to those bowls, the bowls that were like the bracelets and the how many years. And I was looking and calculating, and I saw the white ones, and I'm like, ooh, I'm definitely not white, And then I went from there, and I was like, oh, I'm an orange. And I was like, oh, my oranges, right? Orange power for sure, right? But hey, we are going to defer to the kings and queens of gold, right? Because we defer to them. So with that, my sweet friend Steve called me and said, hey, I want you to talk at the One Conference. And I said, just promise me I'm going to talk about something spicy. And he says, for sure, because Dr. Miller, you are the spicy Dr. Miller. And I said, great. I said, I really want to talk about something great and innovative and different. And so today we are going to go into a very big drink out of a fire hydrant. But I'm going to try and touch on kind of the main points, the concept, the applicability, the usability, the future related to non-insulin agents in the contribution for care in persons with type 1 diabetes. So let me give you a little bit of a definition because I think you need to know the science. When I'm in my office in Bend, Oregon, I still talk science, so you have an understanding. So we will go through the SGLT2s, which are called sodium glucose-like transport 2 inhibitors. I'm not going to make you regurgitate all of those. The GLP-1s, we refer to them as incretins. They're glucagon-like peptide 1s. We're going to talk about the literature to date, that there is science related to this. There is not indication currently in the United States. Many of us are fighting for that, but we are looking forward to the future. But we have utility in what we call maybe proof of concept. I often say that I will practice outside of the sandbox, but don't go outside the playground, right? Don't do things that are considered too experimental. So we'll go through some of that literature that we've seen up to date in type 1. And how to adjust insulin. I'll also talk about how to get things authorized. I'm a master at prior authorization. I've done quite a bit of modules for the American Diabetes Association. I share a lot of my spicy words about how to combat some of that struggle, right, to overcome those barriers. And then we will look into the future. I'll try not to spoil anything for the technology piece, mainly because I'm excited. I am on the ADA's national, and I've just been asked to be the face of the dual glucose ketone sensor. I was really excited. I thought, well, is my face going to be on all the sensors? And they're like, no. No, it's not going to be on that. I was like, darn it, no. They've asked me because of having diabetes, having type 1, working in the field, my sweet disposition, no. So I'm really excited about that, but I'll defer to others. But I'll briefly talk about how one of our top objectives in this committee is not only to set the standards of what are ketones, why are we doing it, why is it important, because it really is an untapped field. But we're also going to be looking at how can we use this technology, this device, which is something that can keep us safe and healthy, to then be a foundation for the FDA, because I too have been to the FDA like Steve, and they are about safety first. And if we can establish safety, then I think we'll go a lot further for getting these covered. Okay, so let's dive in. So we're going to talk about SGLT2 inhibitors. They are oral medications from the bark of a fruit tree. Yes, pear and apple. They're called fluorescens. That's what their classification is. And so they are natural, really, in their foundation and how they work. And I will go into that a little bit more just in the next slide. They work by blocking what we call the reabsorption of glucose from the urine. And so as a result of that, we dump sugar into the pee. I call it the sweet pea drug, right? Or the drug, it's like you can eat your cake and pee it too, right? That's just how it works, okay? And so it offloads it, and we call that pancreatic independent. You get it? All of us in this room have a kidney. Some of us have more kidneys than others, but we're holding our own, right? And so if the kidney sees it, from the standpoint of flow and delivery of glucose, it will pee it, okay? It is not a nephro or kidney toxic drug. We are actually finding out it protects and preserves the kidney. We will go into that a little bit later. Now, what are some of the side effects related to it? If you pee sugar down there, what can happen? You can get a little jungle down there, right? Big microbial jungle and all these things. So there are ways that we do that to prevent, using barrier creams. I have discovered a bidet. Oh my gosh, I went to South Korea. I'd never been there. They were like, Dr. Miller, come to South Korea, do these things. I got into the bathroom, I phoned my husband, and I'm like, what is this? I don't know how to operate this. And then I realized that bidets are amazing. They help prevent a lot of the undercarriage issues, right? And so we have to protect that sugar from being there. But it's not a deal breaker. We just learn how to do it. Now, there's this questionable idea of urinary tract infections. The data is not quite convincing. But we always want to keep the kidney happy and hydrated. We want to hold these medications in times of not eating or drinking. Now, the big thing for us is because we, as oneers, are pancreatic. I guess we need the independence, right? And so this drug would be ideal for those of us because we would all dump sugar. But what happens with dumping sugar with this whole DKA thing? I tell you, I'm so excited about the dual glucose ketone sensor. We are going to learn so much about diabetes because some people never have been in DKA. I've never been in DKA, but I've totally deserved it, right? It's like, but I don't know why. Many of us are ketosis prone and some are not. We don't know. I have a theory. I think some of us make more glucagon than others, but stay tuned because we don't know. So those people who in the past have used SGLT2s, because what they do is they offload the glucose. You don't see it. You get it? It's still kind of there because it's dumping in the toilet, but what is one of the impetuses for us of those with type 1 diabetes for insulin administration? High glucose. So let's say we're taking an SGLT2 and we're offloading glucose. I'll tell you how it does it. And we don't use as much insulin. We see those tops of our AGP flattening out. And so we're like, wow, this is great. I don't have as many peaks. I'm just peeing it right down the drain. And so we tend to not take as much insulin, but we don't know when our bodies dip below what are called our metabolic threshold, right? The amount of insulin we need to keep ourselves going, breathing, and heartbeat. And that's why we think they are facilitators of DKA. I didn't call it cause of DKA, but facilitators. Get it? And so that's why we have to be aware of who gets DKA, who doesn't, what level. Can we do these drugs safely? Can we do it a low dose to keep it there? Can we see the ketosis prone? Can we be mindful of scenarios that cause that? So I will talk about that later. To the right of the slide are the current players in the United States of the drugs. They're called the Flozins. A little hint, all drugs in the same class end in the same medication type. So the Flozins. On the far right-hand side is the scientific name, and the left side is called the trade name. Farxiga, Jardiance, Invokana, Inpefa, Brenzavvy. Some are more popular than others. Now, I will talk in a moment about SGLT2 and SGLT1. Okay, so we are going to play a just brief physiology game so you all feel knowledgeable of how SGLT2s work. You are all the sugars. You're all the sweet ones, right? And this hall is the urine. We are all in the urine, right? We're all the sugar in the urine. We have been delivered from the blood into the glomerulus, which is a fancy word for the kidney filter, and we're all the sugars frolicking in the urine. And normally, a body, to prevent starvation, will filter the glucose, give the glucose a little wash, and then pull it back. That's what it does. It's called reabsorption. It does that with a lot of things. Water and salt and electrolytes and those kind of things. But what if we had SGLT2 inhibitors, because that reabsorption comes through the doors. These doors are SGLT2 doors, right? And it's how the sugar leaves the urine to go back into the circulation. But SGLT2 inhibitors block the doors. So imagine Steve and Jeremy were SGLT2 inhibitors. They were at the back saying, you can't leave, Eden's not done talking. Go back in there, right? It blocks the exit door passively, but we know they're not very passive. Well, let's just pretend they are. They blocks the door passively so that sugar doesn't go back into the circulation and it gets dumped in the urine. There's something magical about dumping sugar in the urine. We waste calories. We don't have to deal with that glucose. Do you guys get that? It dumps it. We got to make sure and protect for things like that. But what does also follow glucose? A little bit of water. So we got to keep the kidney happy and hydrated. Not overdone. We just, if we're going into surgery or that kind of thing, we're going to hold it. But there's something magical about blocking the glucose. It decreases the flow to the kidney. Now you might say, that's bad. No, it actually, our kidneys are hyperfiltrated, right? We all know we have to pee like racehorses, right? And so when you decrease the flow to the kidney, you protect it from the kidney function. You protect its blood pressure. There's also something about decreasing that burden to the kidney that affects the heart. And I personally believe the kidney is queen and the heart is king. And when the queen is happy, the king is happy. And it does it through tone, sympathetic tone. So we see cardiovascular improvement, improvement in death, improvement in kidney function related to these drugs, independent of the glucose they're offloading. Isn't that fantastic? We are actually using a drug that uses the kidney to dump sugar and it benefits the kidney. Okay, so are there potential uses for type 1? We already talked about the fact that we are pancreatic dependent. These are pancreatic independent. We talked about some of the issues related to it. What is the study so far? Now understand there's not a lot of trials, so there's not a lot of stuff to say these are specific. And what was one of the big beefs with the FDA? Well, they looked at A1C. And what if we get benefits beyond A1C when we talk about diabetes? What if we get weight loss? What if we get improvement with peak postprandial, right, or time in range? Glucose variability, because we know glucose variability matters, right? Do you know glucose variability is a highly associated condition with lows? When we have high glucose variabilities, we have higher incidences of lows. So we need further studies, and we're continuing to do that because maybe we look at these medications as something beyond just glucose. Now, I threw this in here, and yes, it's crazy, and many of you are going to have honorary medical degrees by the time you're done, but I wanted to show you how they affect the paths in the body. Because we are finding that cardio, heart, renal, kidney, metabolic, how we process foods and foodstuffs, because we really have a metabolic problem. Yes, we have a glucose problem, but we also have a food and foodstuffs problem. Fat, those kind of things. And yes, some of us, I must say, we see a very fit group here, but some of us do struggle with excess adiposity, and the rate of obesity is identical in type 1 as it is in the general population. It's also the most misdiagnosed because this well-meaning provider looks at you at your age, your ethnicity, and your height to weight ratio and says, oh, you can't be a type 1. Okay, so this is something to kind of digest because these medications we're talking about, the SGLT2s and the GLP-1s have overlapping features. They have overlapping improvement in all of these things. And what we are finding is if you can cover these organ systems, the organism gets healthier. And so many of us are like, as type 1s, well, I have a kidney too, right? Don't leave me out. I have a heart too. And for the longest time, we were considered purists. It's only about insulin. It's only about insulin. But what if that's just one of the hormones that we need, right? So what are some of the takeaways? You know that there are current studies that are ongoing because we have to be safety first. And we also have to say, what are some of the secondary benefits? So many of us who are either involved in these trials, we're like, we want safety first, but we also want more than just A1C, right? Because A1C is important. But we also have found in the type 2 realm, of diabetes, you can actually improve an A1C and not improve cardiovascular outcomes. That's not a bad thing. It's not the destination A1C, it's how you get there. And so these particular agents do improve A1C. They also improve weight. Not a ton, 2 to 4% body weight reductions. For some of you say, well, I don't need to lose weight. You're probably not going to lose a lot. But they can cause undercarriage issues, which I told you how we can avoid, and they can facilitate DKA in certain circumstances, and we're going to learn how to prevent that. And so here is some of the data results that are out. And yes, the Europeans get to play with sotagliflozin. And we don't get to do that just yet here in the United States, but we are seeing them used in a scenario where we call them not approved. I would not call them contraindicated. Do you know the difference? there's something that is indicated and approved, and there's some that are contraindicated. It's not contraindicated, it's just not indicated, okay? And so as we continue to look at these trials, we are going to see the utility percolate up. We're also going to see how to use it, because many of us experts know how to do that. And there may not be a booklet of how to do it, but I'm going to show you a little bit of how to consider this with type 1 diabetes. First off, I generally do not add an SGLT2 for those who have an A1C 9 or greater. Why? They're kind of insulin deficient. I'm not saying that they're non-compliant or that kind of thing. They're insulin deficient, and I want to make sure that they're not going to necessarily be ketosis prone. These do offload a little bit of fluid, so I want to make sure and don't get them dehydrated, okay? And so I'm just mindful of that. In addition, its main effect is what we call postprandial. And so in being postprandial, it tends to blunt the peaks on your CGM. And so what I do is I talk to individuals about always take your insulin. Don't say, hey, my blood sugar is 150. I'm pretty good. I can hang out at 150, right? Because it's a hidden glycemia. And so you want to make sure and always take a little glucose. Hold it in times of surgery or fluid, lack of fluid, just like we do any kind of other medicines that we take that kind of make us feel punky, right? Use smaller doses. The smaller the dose still confers secondary glucose benefits, the lowest therapeutic dose, sometimes half tablet. You can get these out of Canada, sweet people up in Canada. You can buy them cash. You don't have to go on a road trip to get them. It's not illegal. And you have your provider get them that's shipped. You take half doses, or you could get it authorized through the various channels of, I have kidney disease. Some of these medications are approved for people with kidney disease, regardless of what type of diabetes. Doesn't mean it's contraindicated, okay? So your provider needs to say, oh, we have kidney disease, heart failure, cardiovascular disease. Those are the pathways for approval that you just kind of put aside the type 1 diagnosis. So that is how we get them or obtain them. And you need to find somebody who feels comfortable in that. In addition, when I start an SGLT2, I go through this. Have you ever been in DKA? Doesn't mean that you don't get it. But it means that you have already shown your colors, and we say we're going to stay happy and hydrated. We're not going to drink excess alcohol, counter to yesterday's fun little video, right? Because certain things can inhibit or change glucagon and facilitate DKA. We're going to hold it in times of steroids and illness and those kind of things. Even the lowest therapeutic dose is going to confer protection cardiovascularly, kidney-wise, minimal weight, and a little bit of improvement in your glycemia. Okay? So that is how you add or facilitate SGLT2. Find that provider who feels comfortable, acquire it through secondary approval means such as indications. Now let's transition our remaining time together on GLP-1s. Glucagon-like peptide 1s or GLP-1s are injectable, non-insulin agents that are generally weekly. We do have some daily out there. These are biologics. They're as biologic as an insulin. They are not a drug. They're a gut-derived neuroendocrine hormone that improves satiation. It is showing data on addiction. I'm not saying y'all are closet drug addicts, but we have some food addictions, right? We have some of those who just go to chocolate just for comfort. It helps with those things because it quiets the noise in the brain. Many of the GI-related effects are not from the stomach. They're from the brain. You feel full faster. And if you feel full faster, you can't eat past that incretin, and so therefore get excess satiation. You can have GI-related issues. They are amazing in looking forward. They are currently being looked at for Alzheimer's prevention. Because the brain is an obligate glucose burner, and it needs glucose, doesn't require insulin, and we think Alzheimer's and Parkinson's may be a caramelization of the brain when we have diabetes. They deal with two sides. They prevent glucagon, which is the counter-regulatory hormone in diabetes. We all notice that, right? You know, snort when you're dropping like a fly. But anybody experience dawn phenomenon here? Hey, where's that from? Glucagon. You warm start your engine. Some people don't produce glucagon. That's why I think DKA may be a facilitator with glucagon. But these inhibit glucagon, right? They don't mean it's, oh, you're going to have a low. No, we can't inhibit glucagon more than about 30%. But they're the only drug that inhibits glucagon, which is the glucose you make, not the glucose you take. And so as a result, we get central mediated satiation, we get improvement in gluconeogenesis, which we all do. We get the cardiovascular, now the new flow trial that came out with kidney, and these are their medications. Now here's where it gets hard. Manjaro is tirzepatide. It's a GLP-GIP. It's not two drug, it's two binding. GLP and GIP, gastrointestinal polypeptide, we still don't know exactly how GIP works. That's for another talk. But those drugs are Manjaro and Zepbound. Well, they're different. No, they're not. One is type 2 diabetes, Manjaro, and one is weight loss. We have semaglutide or semaglutide, Ozempic for diabetes type 2, Wegovy for weight loss. Same drug. Same drug. Victoza, liraglutide is the only generic GLP-1 on the market right now. It's not really generic, it's called a follow-on biologic. But it's daily. The others are weekly. There are trials with Victoza daily. Oh, I hit that forbidden button. Okay, they hit that. That one. Oh, help me. Wow, good thing we have them out there. Okay, no forbidden buttons, Eden. Okay, I gotta speed up too. Okay, let's talk about GLP-1, right? So many targets. So many targets. That's why it's the mainstay of type 2 diabetes. But anybody else got those organs up there? I do. I only have one that's gone, but I pretty much fill all the criteria, right? So look at the effects of GLP-1 in native form. Native form means when we make it, right? We make it ourselves, right? This is what we make. We all make it. Everybody, by the way, makes GLP-1 in the room here. We just want to leverage more of it to get those desired effects. Now, decreased gastric emptying. That's bad. No, anybody like hold the burrito and the blood sugar starts rising, right? It's because we absorb glucose very, very fast. And what do we not have? First phase insulin, right? We inject and the insulin's like, I'm coming to the party late, right? And it takes forever. Yet gastric slowing by 15 minutes, which is what GLP-1s do, allows for the insulin to work at the same time. We're not talking gastroparesis. That is an autonomic dysfunction of the nerves in the gut. No, different condition. Gastric slowing, you're already eating too much fat, sitting around, taking a bunch of narcotics, terrible pain, not doing your walk or your fiber, your gut's gonna be pretty slow. So do other things to make sure you have a nice, healthy gut. But actually is beneficial. Pancreas, insulin secretion with glucose, not going to happen, okay? So we're going to forget about that function because we don't have that function. But it does inhibit the production of glucagon, which 50% of the glucose load in a given day is also glucagon contributed. So we could benefit from that. Liver, fatty liver disease, not as much in type 1 diabetes, but it happens. We get elevated liver functions. We get cholesterol congestion. It decongests the liver. It also improves the kidney function. We can all benefit from that, right? Through the flow trial. It also helps with glucose uptake in the muscle. And we feel full, so maybe we can regulate. Now, how much weight loss do you get with the GLP-1? It depends on the dose. Anywhere from 5 to 15%. So let's say I do have a client who wants to use GLP-1s for its benefit, but doesn't really need to lose weight. We'll do the lowest dose. In some cases, we microdose it. And I will talk to you in a minute about how we microdose. So are there data related to the use of GLP-1s in type 1? Yes, there are. I told you that I would talk to you about Victoza. Victoza is a GLP-1 that's daily. Don't confuse it with the weekly counterparts, but it's daily. It also comes in an adjustable pen because we oneers are very sensitive to GLP-1, just like we're sensitive to insulin, right? And so we may require a much lower dose, which allows for the drug to last longer if you get a larger pen, right? So you pay for a larger dose pen, and you count clicks. There's lots of data in counting clicks. Some weekly we count clicks. There are 72 clicks in an Ozempic or a semaglutide pen. If you go the highest dose pen, that you might go, oh my gosh, at $800 cash, the highest dose pen, which is 2 milligrams. If you use 0.25 milligrams, which is the lowest dose of therapeutic semaglutide, that pen gonna last you 8 months if they keep it refrigerated. So that's how we acquire these in a cash pay scenario. Yeah, you gotta drop down money, but you can keep it for a long time. I would suggest you do not go compounding. That is my opinion. Compounding is currently now illegal in the United States. They are outsourcing it to other third world countries, which is a little sketch to me. Okay? And so don't go to those acquiring places, because we can get genuine FDA approved drug through cash pay places, or even like tirzepatide, cash pay in Zepbound comes in vials, and I microdose the vials. So you got to find somebody who knows how to do this, okay? Who knows how to give you the dose to acquire it. Not only that, we can actually acquire them through other approvals, right? Wegovy, which is the weight loss drug, has cardiovascular risk reduction. That's the only place I can get it under Medicare, because Medicare doesn't do weight loss at all. So you have cardiovascular disease, I can put Wegovy on there as a cardiovascular risk reduction drug, and I can get it approved. Obstructive sleep apnea, Zepbound is approved for obstructive sleep apnea. Fatty liver disease, other things. So you see, you need to have a clinician who is aware of how to utilize the current indications, because remember, we are not contraindicated as type 1s, we're just not indicated, okay? So we have ongoing trials looking at A1C reduction, secondary weight reduction. You get higher weight when you use higher drug, but you still get all the benefits even when you're using that low therapeutic drugs, or what we call microdosing, which is half therapeutic dose, okay? And so let me look at one of these cases, because I'll end with that, because I think it was a really good case. Now, some of you might look at this as just a glucose case, but this individual came in with an A1C of 8. She was using 40 units of long-acting plus 6 to 12 units with meals. She had type 1. She had a height-to-weight ratio of 32.5, which means class 1 obesity. She had a family history of heart disease. She wants to improve her diabetes, reduce her weight, and improve her overall health. We chose Zepbound in cash pay, and we microdose the vials. Her target glucose, we're going to reduce the long-acting. This is how you adjust. If you're doing multiple daily injections, you're going to reverse titrate the long-acting to a target of about 120. It means every morning you're less than 120, or let's say about 100. You're going to reduce your long-acting. You're going to do the same thing with your basal. If you have an adaptive pump, it will adapt. In addition to rapid-acting reduction, about 20%. Those clinicians know how to do that. They reduce your rapid-acting insulin by 20%. You can initially do it by whatever the pump says calculation, minus 20%. And so this was her follow-up. Now, some of you may judge, oh my gosh, she's having high blood sugars. This was her first follow-up about 16 months after treatment. Why? Because she didn't come back, which was interesting. But she had lost 50 pounds with this medication. Remember, she was class 1 obesity. Her insulin, look at her insulin change. She was in multiple daily injections, right? She wasn't in a pump. Her current A1C was 7.9, but her glucose management indicator was 8.5. She was only using Zepbound at 2.5 milligrams weekly, but what did I need to talk to her about? She had reduced her insulin according to what we had talked about, but she needed to take a little bit more with meals. What else does she need to do? Reduce her long-acting a little bit more. She needs to borrow from her long-acting and deposit in her mealtime. So this is the real world in how we adjust these medications. So let's close with this. There are many things SGLT2 and GLP-1s can do for us. That's what's so brilliant about them. They both have kidney benefits. They both have cardiovascular death benefits. I do not think we as type 1s are much different. They also have metabolic benefits based on glycemic control, and also what we call dysfunctional metabolism or excess adiposity. Some of you may not have excess adiposity, but we know that excess weight is a single driver of cardiovascular risk. So it depends on what you're wearing these medications for. because we do want to improve our overall health, going beyond just looking at glycemia, because we want to impact these things. So stay tuned, because we're going to learn a little bit about technology and how those pending approval of the dual glucose ketone sensor, I believe, will send a foundation for us to go back to the FDA to allow for these drugs to get covered. But in the meantime, yes, many of us are using them. Find somebody who feels comfortable with using them in their smaller dose form for the need that you have secondarily related to your disease. And with that, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Eden. Okay, so we're moving on, but right before I introduce Dr. David on, let's take 2 seconds. Everybody stand up, stretch, do a little move, do whatever you need to do. We're gonna be sitting in here for a while, learning all kinds of stuff. I definitely did not do yoga this morning, so this is all I'm getting. So hopefully that helps, and obviously take bio breaks as you need them. But we're moving along. And, it's thanks again to Eden for that important talk on how to use these medications. All right, everybody stop stretching. So up next, we have Dr. David on, who I've known for a long time. We did our fellowship training together. He was just actually 1 year below me or behind me in training. And now he works at Hoag Hospital, which is just right up the way in Orange County. And so, as we talked about in the morning session, there's so much going on in technology, so we really need kind of a dedicated expert, and this is David's become an internationally recognized expert, and one of our very few people here that are speaking without type 1 diabetes, but we're going to be nice to him and still allow him to educate us on all things kind of technology. So with that, David, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I can hear my voice through the mic, which is horrifying. But yeah, so thank you, Jeremy. I think he mentioned that I trained with Jeremy and Steve. So hopefully I had some good mentorship. And I'm really excited to talk with you today about type 1 diabetes and technology and how it can improve your life. So oftentimes we use a lot of metaphors. I love using metaphors when we talk about things. And last year I really talked about relationships, right? Some of you were probably here, but the big takeaway was don't get married to your devices. You can get married in real life, but just don't get married to your devices because there's always new things happening. There's new changes, software updates, new features coming out. And so you always want to make sure you are keeping your options open and learning about the different types of technologies that are coming out. And I think that served as a really great foundation for the whole speed dating series that you guys have all seen those amazing clips for. So today I kind of said, okay, how can I make it a little bit different? So we're going to use a different analogy today, although I might go back to the relationship one every once in a while. So we're going to talk about cars and driving, okay? And we'll talk about it a couple different ways. So one is just like when you're choosing your car, there's so many different types of cars, right? You can't say, what's your favorite car, right? So I make content on Instagram and TikTok, and sometimes people will message me and they'll say, okay, but what's your favorite pump? And I'm like, like Jeremy said earlier, I don't really know. It really matters what your preferences are, what your interests are, and it's just like a car. Some people, are the SUV type. Some people want the fast driving car, electric versus combustion engine. So there's a lot of different preferences. And the great thing is that we have a lot of options, and the number of options are getting bigger and bigger each year. I think in the past 2 years alone, we've had 2 brand new companies enter the market, which is such a huge deal because competition breeds innovation and hopefully lower prices and things like that. So I have the silly goal, I set aside the silly goal of trying to explain to a room of people with type 1 diabetes what having type 1 diabetes is like. But hopefully you'll bear with me. And this analogy was made by someone with type 1 diabetes. But it actually was pretty transformative in my life. I still remember sitting in the room hearing him talk about this, and I was like, wow, that's such a great way to understand it. I wish all my endocrinology friends could hear this. And he was saying, managing diabetes is like driving a car, right? It's not that complicated. Most or pretty much everybody, I think, above the age of 16 or whatever can drive a car. Obviously, it is really complicated. If you think about driving a car, is actually very complicated. But like I said, most people can learn how to drive a car. We don't gatekeep who can drive cars or not. And I think that's how it is with diabetes. Of course, it's very complicated. There's a steep learning curve. But once you learn it, it's things like dosing your insulin, understanding all your different activities, things like that. But he goes on, it's with the caveat that you can never leave the car and that your hands are chained to the steering wheel. And I thought that was so telling because at the time, I was dating my now wife, and I was commuting back and forth between LA and San Diego every weekend. And I remembered, for those of you that have made that drive, that first hour, it's like fine. You get to see the coast, you're on PCH, or you're not on PCH, but you're driving near PCH, and it's beautiful. You're like, this is fine. And then that second hour, you're like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. Sometimes you're hitting traffic in like Orange County or something like that. And that's when you're like, oh, this second hour is painful, right? And then you can extend that to longer trips, right? If you're from California and say you're driving to NorCal from SoCal or Vegas from LA, and it's just that hour 4, hour 5, hour 6 where things get to be really tough. And of course, that's when we talk, I think that's a great illustration for diabetes burnout. Because when you're having to drive those extra miles and you're never able to get out of the car and have a rest stop, that's what makes type 1 diabetes, in my opinion, as someone without type 1 diabetes, which is so horrible to say, but that's what I think makes it hard, right? It's the fact that it's nonstop and you can't just get out of the car, relax, take your mind off driving the road. And that's where technology, I think, has so much potential benefit. And I was glad Steve said this, so I guess I must have learned this from him. But when I think of my job as an endocrinologist, I always tell people it's really easy. I have 2 goals. I want to help people with type 1 diabetes improve their blood sugar, and I want to reduce the emotional burden of living with that disease. And I always say that sometimes these goals are not necessarily always going to be fully aligned, right? So there's this metric that we talk about, time in range, and we want that to be high, right? Higher time in range is generally better. But sometimes I'll tell people, or I'll tell a patient, I'll say, hey, your time in range is 75%. That's a great number. Our goal generally is to be above 70%. And maybe if you take advantage of some of these technological tools, maybe your time in range might drop 5%, 3%. Maybe it goes from 80 to 75 or 85 to 75. But if that additional benefit in terms of mental burden, right, maybe that means sleeping easier. Maybe that means not being as embarrassed having to whip out your insulin pen at meals, or not feeling like you have to skip doses because you don't want other people to see you take your insulin dose. Maybe there can be an emotional burden benefit that outweighs that slight trade-off you might have in blood sugar control. Now, of course, a lot of times I think they do work in tandem, and you can improve your blood sugar and reduce the emotional burden. But I think it's important to note that improving blood sugar is not the only goal, and sometimes that can be one-upped by the important goal of reducing emotional burden. And of course, this is where I love to use the self-driving car analogy when it comes to automated insulin delivery. And of course, we're not there yet, right? When I talk to people and I'm trying to explain to them what automated insulin delivery does, I say it's kind of like the Tesla of self-driving cars. It's kind of like where the cars are now, right? You can't just take a nap in the passenger seat and expect to wake up at your destination. But going back to that last analogy where I said you can never get out of the car, so some people are like, when I tell them that, they're like, wait, I never use the autopilot thing on my car, then why would anybody want to use automated insulin delivery? But once again, it goes back to my previous analogy that if you're never getting out of the car, right, and you're driving your car while you're sleeping, and you're driving your car on the long road to Vegas, that's when these automated tools in your car are a lot more helpful, because you can be a little bit distracted. You can look at your phone a little bit longer to read that notification. And that's where I think this self-driving car or the car automation analogy really helps, because those tools are so useful when you're driving long distances and not getting out of the car. All right, so the other theme here is I just came back from Orlando with a trip with my family, and so we rewatched Ratatouille. And there's that chef guy, he says, like, everyone can cook, right? So my opinion is that now in diabetes technology, we have so many different options that everybody can find a solution, I think, that works for them. And you'll see here there's inhaled insulin on the left, there's insulin pens, there's CGMs, there's automated insulin delivery pumps. So there's so many options we have now at our fingertips that really, no matter what your personal preferences are, I think you can find a solution where you are in a good place and happy with your improvements. Now, Steve mentioned there are 5 companies now. If you don't recognize MiniMed, you may know that Medtronic recently announced that they're going to spin off their insulin pump company, their diabetes company, back into its original name, which was MiniMed, so MiniMed, formerly Medtronic. And then Twist is a brand new pump that just came out this summer, and Beta Bionics is a relative newcomer as well. Now, in this talk today, I'm not going to bore you with all the details about the differences between the systems, but I'll give a quick kind of teaser of some things to consider when you're choosing an automated insulin delivery system. So of course, the physical shape and size is a huge thing. Some people don't want it to be so bulky because they don't want it to be visible when it's in their pocket. Obviously, another big decision point for people is tubing versus tubeless. That brings to mind that wonderful video from Michelle, who was tubeless. And CGM integration. So some people are very attached to their CGM. Some people, it's like Apple versus Samsung, right? People get really passionate about Samsung. Some people get really passionate about iPhone. And I think that's sometimes how it looks when people are talking about Libre versus Dexcom. So if you're a Libre lover, there are good options for you. If you're a Dexcom lover, there are good options for you. If you're a Medtronic lover, there are going to be really good options for you, and we'll talk about that. But they're coming really soon, so no hate on my Medtronic friends. Oh, and another big one is smartphone control. So this is such a huge improvement now. There are multiple options that are fully smartphone controlled. You can control your entire pump from your smartphone. And for some people, that's a huge game changer. And for others, that scares the crap out of them because they're like, my phone is not reliable, and they get scared. So if that's something that you're really dying to have, like I would love to control my phone from my pump from my smartphone, you have options. If you're like, that sounds horrible, I barely know how to operate it, you have options as well to continue using your pump. Now this slide is really deep in the woods, so I'm not going to go too much into it. But another big aspect to consider is the algorithm powering the automated insulin delivery system. And that's like the self-driving car of like the actual self-driving logic part, right? And now I feel like it's so politically charged to throw out the name Tesla, right? But we think of like Tesla as like, at least up until recently, it was very well known and trusted for their automation. And so, you want to try to find the right system that fits your needs. And in this little gradient graph, you probably can't read the small text, but on the left side, it says, less configurable and with less user input. And that's not a bad thing, because some people don't want to do anything. They want to do as little as possible when it comes to using their pump. And on the right side of that gradient, it says highly configurable and more user input. And so on the flip side, you have people that want to press all the dials, have all the levers visible to them, and really micro-adjust and micromanage how their pump works. And I love the fact that we really have pumps across the entire spectrum to fit your various personalities. So I have patients that are doing really well on Beta Bionics, which is minimal intervention. I have patients, well, I trust that they're doing well because they just started like 2 weeks ago on Twist, that I think will do really well, and that has a lot of different levers for them to adjust. Another thing to consider is how does your algorithm handle missed boluses, right? So I hear sometimes, in a rare occasion, people will forget to bolus for their food, once in a while, very rare event. But when that happens, how is your pump going to handle that? And all the algorithms are pretty good, so that is not a complete, yes or no decision point. But some systems, for example, the Omnipod 5, it does not give auto-correction boluses, and it can actually kick you out of automation if you run too high for too long. So for someone who I call like a never boluser, for someone who absolutely never boluses and kind of forgets that function even exists, sometimes the Omnipod may not be the best option for them because it kicks them out of auto mode. And without the proper education, they then might be turning off automation and losing that benefit. Another big thing is target glucose range, right? So as the systems have been out longer and longer, the FDA has been more comfortable with lowering the targets allowed in these automated insulin delivery systems. The initial systems were pretty much restricted to like above 120 milligrams per deciliter. But for some people, they're like, 120, that's so high. Now, interestingly enough, there are also other people who think 120 is kind of low and they get kind of anxious. But for those people that like to run on the lower side, feel more comfortable in the 90s, some of these older systems or older algorithms, they might think, oh man, it feels like too many cooks in the kitchen. I'm trying to drive my blood sugar down to 95, but my pump is fighting me and suspending insulin, and this is kind of annoying, right? Having two people trying to drive the car at the same time. But now with the newer systems like the Medtronic 780G and the Sequel Twist, you can actually have lower targets. So the Medtronic, when it came out, was the lowest target, as low as 100 milligrams per deciliter. And now the Sequel Twist actually has now the new lowest target of 87 milligrams per deciliter. And another thing to take into consideration is that some of the systems can allow you to have different targets at different times of day, right? So maybe you're like, overnight, I'm not that worried about huge fluctuations, so I don't mind running a lower target. Maybe I'll run my target, if you're using the Sequel Twist, because you can have multiple targets throughout the day, maybe you're going to set an overnight target of 90. And then during the day, you're working. Teachers, for some reason, a lot of my teachers like to run a little higher during the day because they don't want to be nibbling in front of their kids. Maybe then during the day, school day, you'll have your target set to 130 or something like that. So some of the systems allow you to have different targets at different times of day. Now, of course, a lot of people also like to run their targets higher overnight because they're fear of hypoglycemia. So it's adaptable, right? That's the point, is you get to pick your targets and set that schedule for yourself throughout the day. Now, since not everybody here is on an automated insulin delivery system, I'm not going to do too much of a deep dive on the different systems. I have the pleasure of being able to give both the beginner and the advanced talk this afternoon. So just to kind of lay out what's going on, because there's so many good stuff on the schedule. There's so many good speakers. The beginner talk, think of it like the talk for people that are pump curious, right? Like you've kind of heard about it. You don't really know much about it, or maybe you're with a provider that doesn't really talk that much about different systems, maybe not up to date on technology. So if you're a complete novice or just wanting to get over some of your concerns or learn about what type, maybe you're like, man, everyone talks about it, but I just never got the time, I just never sat down and heard what automated insulin delivery is, that might be a good talk for you. Now, if you want to learn about the different systems and kind of the nuances of each different system and maybe some small tweaks with each system that might help optimize your control, that would be the advanced talk. That's right after that. And then after that, there's a third session in the afternoon with Q&A where you can kind of come and ask me your problems. And I'll try my best. That one's always a little scary because some people come with real challenging questions. But for the rest of the talk, I'm going to focus on CGM since hopefully many, many, many of you are on CGM. I think the official company line of TCOID is that everybody should be on a CGM, which I would agree with. Of course, there's rare exceptions, but I think CGM is just so valuable. And we have great options. So the Dexcom G7, kind of the old staple when it comes to CGM and type 1 diabetes. I consider them like the Apple of CGM. They've been around. They created the market. They've been really pioneering. And they actually, the big change here is they got a 15-day FDA approval. So there's a 15-day product. It's going to be called the G7 15-day, as you can see in that picture. And it's already FDA approved. But the company is holding the release until sometime later this year to basically allow it to integrate with pumps at launch, which I think makes a lot of sense because it sometimes gets confusing when a system is out and you're like, you have to figure out which pump they're on and you're trying to get the right sensor. So hopefully, by the time the G7 15-day comes out later this year, when it arrives, it will already have integration on launch day with all the different partners that the G7 currently partners with. Now, just a quick review. It has a 30-minute warm-up, or actually a few minutes less than that. It's like 26 or 27-minute warm-up. So by far the shortest warm-up on the market. It is the only sensor with a grace period, so a 12-hour grace period. That's why 10.5 and 15.5. So after the 10-day session ends, it looks like it's about to end, and then you'll get 12 more hours. So if you're sleeping or if you're out with your friends or at work, you'll have time to finish your day or finish your nap and then change your sensor in the morning or after that. It also is relatively unique in that it accepts finger stick calibrations. So the Libre system does not allow itself to be calibrated. And the 15-day was approved for 18 plus. So interestingly enough, they made the decision to not try to get it approved for younger kids. And the reasoning behind that is that the kids, they're running around all the time. I think they already have a hard enough time keeping it on for 10 days. They're like, let's not deal with 15 days yet. And there's direct to Apple Watch. So it's the only sensor that allows you to see your readings directly from your watch, even if your phone is in another room. And it has the widest integration with pumps. So it works with all the Tandem systems, the Beta Bionics iLet and the Omnipod 5. And although you'll see that the integration, CGM pump integration world is getting a lot more complicated in a good way, meaning that there's a lot more partnerships and a lot more options available for people. So these are some quick pro tips. I did go over them last year, but a lot of people don't know about them, and if you don't, it's really important. So you can actually overlap the two sensors. So you can start a new sensor session, or not start a new session, but apply the new sensor to yourself before the old one ends. So the grace period is perfect for that. So right when you enter the grace period, say your first sensor, period, the 10-day ends. During your grace period, apply the second sensor, but don't start it, don't turn it on, just put it on your body. And then after the grace period ends on your first sensor, so about 12 hours later, you can pull off the first sensor and then activate the second sensor, and you will actually have there won't be any warm-up time, right? Because you've waited already that 30 minutes. And it will be past the initial 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours, where you probably have learned this by now, but your sensors tend to be pretty wonky for the first 12 to 24 hours. So you're not relying on the new sensor during its most inaccurate period of time. Now, there's a really big caveat here, hot off the presses. Some of you may have gotten an email yesterday from Tandem, and they did say it's very important that if you're going to do that strategy, to wait 20 minutes, at least 20 minutes. So you put on your second sensor, wait until your first sensor ends, take it off, and then you'll have to wait. They recommend waiting at least 20 minutes before activating your second sensor. And that's because, it sounds kind of scary, but because they said that there's a rare possibility that it could do an autocorrection bolus based on your first sensor. So if you activate the second sensor within 20 minutes, potentially it could still see some readings from your old sensor. So check your email if you're a Tandem user. It's a very scary sounding email, but if you read it closely, I think the actual risk is quite low. But the easiest thing to take away is just wait 20 minutes after you end your first sensor session before starting your second session. There's a delay high alert feature. So a lot of people don't know this, but this is a really cool feature too, where you basically can say, okay, once you rise above whatever your high alert is, say it's 200, you don't want to get alerted every time it goes above 200, because if you just hit 205 and come right back down, like, okay, that's what's kind of happens, right? You can actually say, only alert me if it goes above my threshold and stays above my threshold for a certain amount of time. So you can click that toggle on delay first alert, and then timing, you can select 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes. So that way it kind of filters down on those like, oh, you're 200 but coming right back down. And it also reduces the temptation to rage bolus. Now, another feature that's also available on the Libre 3 Plus I'll talk about is you can silence all alarms for up to 6 hours, which is really convenient, but also very potentially dangerous, so be very alert about when you're using this. But this is a great use case for this is like, say it's 3 a.m. in the morning, you got this really low alert, and maybe you've treated it, or you know it's not a real signal. Instead of getting alarmed every 10, 15 minutes, you can actually snooze alerts for 2 hours, and you won't get any more alerts. So once again, a little bit dangerous, but if you use it with caution, I think it could be a really helpful feature. And of course, the direct to watch is a big thing. Now, they did introduce some really major software advantages just in June in what they call version 2.9. And I think some of these right now are iPhone only. So the first thing is that it does have smart food logging now. So you can actually snap a photo of your meal, and it will use AI to basically pull out what it is. Now, before you get too excited, it does not auto-populate the carb count yet, which is good and bad. That's a funny reaction. It's like, ah. But it doesn't auto-populate the carb count. But I think it was a safety feature for now. And if you talk to them, they say that at some point they probably will be able to turn it on. But I think for safety purposes, they wanted to kind of first just populate it. And the next thing is you can actually create kind of journals now with photos. So in this example on the left, it's a photo of her jogging. On the middle photo, it's a picture of a meal. And it will actually show you kind of the glucose tracing in response to that activity. So you can kind of look back and say, oh, when I go jogging, this is what it looks like. When I eat this particular meal, that's what my glucose response looked like. So you can kind of create like a library of different responses that you've had to different things. I'll kind of go a little bit more efficiently for timing purposes, but the Freestyle Libre 3 Plus is its big competitor, kind of like the Samsung or the Android in this comparison. And a lot of people, especially people with type 1 diabetes, have disregarded the Libre because you had to swipe the Libre 2, right? And that's obviously not very helpful. But now you no longer have to swipe. So it automatically streams data to your phone or reader every minute. It already has that 15-day wear period, and it has great accuracy. It is actually the smallest CGM on the market. It's about the thickness and size of 2 stacked pennies. And it's been really ramping up its AID integration portfolio. So it is actually the only sensor that works with the sequel twist at launch. It already works with the Beta Bionics eyelet. Its older version, the Libre 2 Plus, is already compatible with Tandem and Omnipod 5, but the 3 Plus has been announced to be compatible with those systems soon. And there's actually a partnership with Medtronic that's coming very shortly, which I'll talk about later. Some big updates on the Libre front is that there's a brand new app called the Libre by Abbott app. It's kind of confusing because on the store now there's a Libre 2 app, a Libre 3 app, and an app called Libre by Abbott. But I highly recommend you switch over to the Libre by Abbott app because it basically is a cleaner interface and it has some new features. So it actually allows you to now view your historical data. So one of the frustrations that people used to have before is like you couldn't see what your blood sugar was 2 hours ago. You could see the graph, but you can't see what the exact number was. But now you can actually drag your finger along the graph to kind of see what the actual glucose reading is at that time. Another thing is with the Libre 2 and 2 Plus, interestingly enough, it actually, if you use the Libre by Abbott app, you can actually make the 2 and 2 Plus a streamable sensor, which is kind of interesting. And they actually announced at ADA in June, a big conference for diabetes, that they plan to have Apple Watch integration soon. However, I'm not sure if it's going to have a widget on the face. It might have to be the app that you have to open up. But if you do want to have some of those features now, like an Apple Watch widget pictured on the bottom left, or something in what's called the dynamic island, that's that like thing in the top middle of your phone sometimes that has like sports scores or Uber, Lyft announcements or Starbucks announcements or whatever. That is called the dynamic island, and you can actually get your blood sugar in there using third-party apps called Gluru or Sweet Dreams. Now the MiniMed, Medtronic has already announced partnerships with Libre, like I talked about. So they have another so they have 2 sensors that are right around the corner. And this is what I was saying. They have 2 new sensor options that are just about to come out. So they have the Simplera sensor, which is pictured in the bottom middle. So it looks kind of like a Libre. It's a little bit squared. And that's worn on the upper arm, but it's 50% smaller than the current Guardian 4. And it's all in one piece. So it's fully disposable, just like the other sensors on the market. Otherwise, it's very similar in functionality to the current Guardian 4. So it's still a 7-day sensor, still a 2-hour warm-up. But that should launch anytime, any day now. I think they might already be contacting existing users about upgrade plans. And then they just announced that they're going to be integrating what they call the Instinct sensor, which is essentially a Freestyle Libre 3 Plus made by Abbott, but it's going to be specific to the MiniMed, and it's awaiting FDA approval. Another really important system is called the Eversense 365, and this is an implanted continuous glucose monitor. That little stick thing in the bottom left is very small, even though it's very big on the screen. It's about the size of a long grain of rice, and it goes in your upper arm. You wear the transmitter over it, but you can take off the transmitter at any time. So if you're going to go for a swim and you don't want to wear a CGM that's visible, you can just take it off, put it right back on. If you're walking through a doorway and it gets knocked off, you can put it right back on. And it's actually a 1-year sensor, hence the name 365. So you only have to get the new sensor inserted every year. It actually has much less compression lows, so a lot less inaccuracy in that regard. And it's the only sensor that has vibratory alerts. So the transmitter itself will vibrate on body, even if your phone isn't nearby. And it's a weekly calibration now. So one of the knocks on the Eversense product line before was that you had to calibrate it every day. But now, after 2 weeks, it's a once-weekly fingerstick calibration. And they have their first AID partner announced. It's going to be the sequel twist. And they announced Q3 in 2025 availability. And that's October, which is like potentially 2 months from now. So that's really, really exciting. I think the Eversense 365 is a great option, especially for people that have issues with adhesives. If you're getting frustrated by having to meet a new sensor every 10 to 15 days, this is one same sensor all year. I think it's a great option for people that is kind of under-recognized. So continuing the analogy I talked about, so it's really important, try to test drive or lease or something your different devices to really find the right fit for you. A lot of people think they're locked into a 4-year contract with their pumps, but we're kind of in an era now where it's not as much of a big deal because only 2 of the systems really follow that rule, the Medtronic and the Tandem. Now, a lot of the other systems like Beta Bionics, Omnipod 5, and Sequel Twist go through what's called pharmacy benefit, so you can switch at any time. So if you're on a Tandem pump, I'm sure they won't love me to say this, but if you're on a Tandem pump, you can actually try and switch to a pharmacy-based pump. Similarly, if you're on an Omnipod 5, see, I'm being fair. If you're on an Omnipod 5 and you want to switch to Tandem, since one's pharmacy and one's hardware, you can actually switch from Omnipod to Tandem. So you really have a lot more flexibility than you might think because not all the pump companies are locked into that 4-year contract. And every pump can be returned within 30 days. Some of them are even longer, 60 days, 90 days. So take advantage of those offers to try things out. I'm going to skip this a little bit just for the sake of time. And Steve did talk about Afrezza and inhaled insulin. I did want to talk a little bit about the future of CGM. And I think ketones, kind of like Eden was talking about, is really the next big thing that's going to be coming through CGMs. So she did talk about ketones, but just as a quick review, because sometimes people don't fully understand it, ketones are produced by the body when there isn't enough insulin to use sugar for energy. So you can have low levels of ketones that build up during fasting or exercise, right? The ketogenic diet, actually, people will have some levels of ketones because they're fasting. However, especially in people with type 1 diabetes, the buildup of ketones can lead to diabetic ketoacidosis, which is like the big bad guy in type 1 diabetes because it makes you go to the hospital, can potentially cause really bad effects. And the symptoms of DKA is really bad GI like disturbances. So really bad nausea, vomiting. That's when you know that the DKA is getting really bad. So as she talked about, SGLT2 inhibitors like Jardiance and Invokana have a rare but serious side effect of DKA at relatively normal blood sugars. So when you're not on medications like SGLT2 inhibitors, typically you only go into DKA when your blood sugars are sky high, like 400, something like that. But if you're on an SGLT2 inhibitor, sometimes since you're peeing out your glucose, right, like she talked about, you might have a blood sugar of 200 but have DKA. And so it's really scary then because you're like, oh no, how will I know I have DKA or not? How will I know I'm at risk? So that's where continuous ketone sensing, it could be a big deal. And the Freestyle Libre is probably going to be the first to market. Like Jeremy said, it's going to be out any day now. And it's basically going to allow, in addition to measuring glucose, it's going to measure ketone levels. And they've already announced partnerships with Tandem, Beta Bionics, and Sequel to integrate the dual sensor, they're calling it, because it's ketones and glucose. And the potential use cases, the potential benefits to having a continuous ketone sensor is that, one, you can early detect DKA, so you can treat it earlier. You don't have to use those urine ketone strips anymore. 2, it can help detect early pump failure. So this is a really cool one that I didn't think about, but they found that your ketone levels will actually start to rise before your glucose levels do. So if you're wearing a continuous ketone monitor, it might be able to alert you that, hey, your infusion site's not working as well as you think before your blood sugar starts to rise, so you don't fall behind the 8 ball when trying to treat it. Also, like I talked about, the side effect with SGLT2 inhibitors, it would be great for people on SGLT2 inhibitors so that they know if they're increasing their risk for type DKA. And there's just so much we don't know about this. Maybe we might use the data from a CKM to help inform future automated insulin delivery. The actual implementation is relatively unclear. It sounds like Eden might know all the secrets, so you can go ask her how it's going to look. But I'm not sure yet if it's going to be a number. Like, is it going to be 2 graphs that you're looking at? Is it 2 numbers you're looking at? I think my suspicion is that, or my recommendation would be to go with like a color coding thing, right? It's like, you're green, you're red, you're orange, or something like that. Oh, color code. Hey, they followed my opinion. Oh, great. We all know. First to hear. So that's great. Now, this is my last slide, so hopefully you can pull me off with a cane or turn on music if I need to leave. But future of AID, so 7-day infusion sets, Medtronic already has one. Tandem has one that's just around the corner. They already completed the studies and the data was published. So hopefully that will be out. All the pump companies are moving towards tubeless because they know that Omnipod is very popular for the fact that it's tubeless. Tandem has a tubeless version of the Mobi that should be out very soon, maybe in the next 6 to 12 months. And it would be the same Mobi pump, but it would replace the tube, the cartridge. Sorry, not the tube. It would replace the cartridge with a version that goes straight into you. So you wouldn't have to have the little pigtail catheter thing. So it would just be the tubeless Mobi. And they're also working on a true patchless pump. Medtronic is working on it. Smarter algorithms are coming down the pike where we have to do less and less meal announcements. Combined CGM and infusion sets, there's a lot of research there, but I think it's still a far ways away. Overnight only AID is something that's really exciting. There's a startup called Luna that's working on a system. I always think of it like the night guard thing that people wear. You know, some people don't want to wear braces all day, so they only wear the night guard at night. That's kind of how the Luna system would be. It's like automated insulin delivery that you only wear at night, and then during the day you can do shots. And then Beta Bionics is working on a dual hormone system. So a lot of exciting things. These are some resources for me, and I think there's going to be announcements coming up next.
Nice job, buddy. Okay, everybody. Before announcements, we have to introduce our very special guest. From breaking down a sports story to breaking down the importance of screening for type 1 diabetes, our speaker today really knows the power of information, like all of us at TCOID. He is a sports football insider and has a very powerful connection to type 1 diabetes. And Jeremy and I had the pleasure of doing a podcast with him. Please welcome Adam Schefter.
I got the,
Okay.
all right. And then get this up. Hold on. There we go. Hi, everybody. Thank you to Sanofi for engaging me to raise awareness around the importance of screening for type 1 diabetes. And thank you to TCOYD for having me here today. It's an honor to be with you all. It's always nice to be in San Diego, especially when you live in New York. So I'm grateful to be out here today with all of you. Hold on one second. Up. I'm supposed to have, okay. I don't know what's going on here. No. Okay. I think I got it now, yeah. With technology. With terrible technology, but I think we've got it all figured out right now. All right. What a powerful, inspiring event it is to be here in front of you all today. I've been to a lot of stadiums, to a lot of locker rooms, training camps. I've covered the National Football League for 35 years, the last 16 for ESPN. But there's something really special about being among the type 1 diabetes community, because I've done that now for the 19 years that I've been together with my wife, Shari. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Adam Schefter. Most people know me as a football insider for ESPN. My job is to pursue information, to break news before it breaks. So whatever that is in the National Football League, draft picks, injuries, trade rumors, anything that happens to your favorite football team, the Bears. I'm sure we have some Chargers. I know they left here, so people probably don't like the Chargers, right? Okay. Well, my job is early information about the Bears and others, not the Chargers. But today, I want to talk about a different kind of early information that's really important, one that's a lot more personal, a lot more powerful. I mentioned to you before, my wife, Shari, lives with type 1 diabetes. And I've seen firsthand what it's like for her to manage this disease and condition. I know what you all go through. I know what your caregivers go through. I've seen how much work it takes, not just physically, but emotionally, to manage this disease day in and day out. And I always say, type 1 diabetics are warriors, truly. I've got tremendous respect for every one of you watching what my wife does on a day in, day out basis. And I have so much respect for the caregivers, too, the partners, the spouses, the brothers, the sisters, the friends, because I know what you go through. Watching Shari go through what she has changed my life. It's shown me how strong she is, how strong all of you are, which is why I call you warriors. And it's opened my eyes to something that we don't talk about enough, and that's how important it is to detect type 1 diabetes early before those symptoms even begin. Critical time. Always being out in front of things, getting information early, so important. A lot of people don't even know that it's possible to do that, but movements like Screen for Type 1 are expanding awareness of early antibody screening, educating those at risk before a potential emergency situation. Talked about the emergency situations. They were talking about DKA before. There was a time I walked into my bathroom. My wife was sprawled out on the floor. I called her endocrinologist. The endocrinologist said, get her to the hospital. My wife said to me, I'm not going to the hospital. And I think for the first time in the 19 years that we've been together, I told her how it's going to be. I think that was the only time that that's ever happened. She went to the hospital, of course. I think that helped save her life. And DKA is the exact kind of reason why I think it's so important for early screening. You don't want that to be your first interaction with this condition. You want to be out in front of this and be prepared. Having more time to prepare and plan for the future can make such a huge difference. I've seen it personally. You can build a care plan. You can involve your family. You can be proactive instead of reactive, which is so important in this day and age. In my world, the world of football, a few minutes, a few seconds can change everything. A team makes a trade. If I get that information 60 seconds before it goes public, that's a big deal. It helps shift the narrative. The value of that early information is massive, but it doesn't even compare to how important it is to get the information early now. More important than ever. And in healthcare, I mean, that's everything. When it comes to type 1 diabetes, T1D, the earlier you know, the more time you may have to prepare and to plan for the future, which is so important. So I'm looking at the caregivers and the support systems here today. The parents, the siblings, the partners, the friends. Your role is huge. I know firsthand. You are the quarterbacks in this game. You're making the calls, you're running the plays, you're picking people up when things get hard, as they often do with this condition, as everybody in this room knows. Sometimes your health gets put on the back burner. You're focused on your child, your spouse, your siblings, somebody else, not yourself. But here's the thing. If just one family member has type 1 diabetes, your risk can multiply by up to 15 times. That's why it's important for at-risk family members to consider screening. You can now screen children and adults with a blood test that checks for T1D-related autoantibodies, markers that can show if someone is at the risk of T1D before those symptoms appear. If you're not sure where to go to screen4type1.com. That's screen4type1.com. It walks you through everything, how to assess your family's risk factors, where to get tested, what those test results could be. I know it can sound a little scary. Trust me, I've had those conversations in my own home, with my family, with my children, with my wife. But here's what I've learned through my job and through my marriage with my wife. Knowledge is power. You can get that knowledge. It's better to know. It's better to be ready. And it's better to have a plan always. There's one more thing that I want to say to you here today, something I've seen again and again, whether it's in sports or in health. Community matters. It absolutely does. The people in this room, you're showing what's possible when families are informed, connected, supported. So let's keep that energy going. If you're here today and someone in your family has T1D, start the conversation today. There's no reason not to. Make an appointment. Talk to your doctor about screening and share what you learn with others. You never know who might be helped by just speaking up. It's pretty simple. Pretty simple. I'm honored to have a small role in this day. I appreciate you having me. Thank you very much. Thank you for the work you do. Thank you for being part of the movement to screen early, plan ahead, and stay strong together. Come over and visit us at the Screen for Type 1 booth in the sponsor lounge to learn more. And again, I just want to express my gratitude, respect, and appreciation for all the people fighting T1D and for all the people in their lives looking out for them, championing their cause. It means a lot. I live that every day, and I have great respect and appreciation for everybody in that spot in this room today. Joe?
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Adam, for being here. We really appreciate it. We just have a few afternoon announcements before we break for the rest of the afternoon. Yay. Okay. First announcement is that the exhibit hall is open until 1:30. This is your last chance to get all of your questions answered by our exhibitors and sponsors, okay? So make sure you go and see them. Also, I wanted to let you know that this year marks a very special year for TCOID. This is our 30th anniversary. 30th anniversary. We started back in 1995. This guy created TCOID in 1995. That was before like CGM was even invented, right? way before. So if you feel that TCOID has made an impact in your diabetes in any way, or if it's just made your diabetes just suck a little bit less, we would love if you would consider sponsoring us and supporting us. And you can do that by going to our exhibit hall and seeing Joe and Brittany at the TCOID booth. They will be taking donations and also selling raffle tickets. Or you can always talk to this guy. In fact, I think somebody might have come up to Steve earlier today and tell us what happened.
Well, this individual, I can at least give away the sex. She wants to remain anonymous, and she made a very generous donation to TCOID. And I know she's in the audience here, and I wanted to thank her. And she said she wanted to stimulate the feeling of giving. And so we thought we'd hit up Adam, being a TV. No.
That's why we kept him up here.
But I want to thank that individual for the very generous donation, and for anybody that would like to donate. We realize no matter what the amount, it's important. And if you're not in the, if you don't have the funds to do it, we just want you to enjoy the day and enjoy our education.
Excellent, yes. Okay, and then on that note, let's talk food. We have our lunch coming up. Our lunch is going to be a chicken quinoa salad, unless you are a vegetarian. If you're a vegetarian, please just let your server know, and they'll be bringing you a tempeh substitute. Also, if you have celiac, you can just ask your server for a gluten-free roll. And lunch is going to be served right out where breakfast was. And then we do have overflow, because there's a lot of you guys today. The overflow is going to be where dinner was yesterday, over in the Sunset Terrace. Okay,
but if you only can eat filet mignon, let your server know.
Yeah, exactly. And then everybody should have gotten a program guide at check-in. If you've misplaced it, do not worry. Outside of this room, on the table, I have a QR code where you can download this, because you're going to want to look at this to know what workshops, what breakouts you want to do, and what Q&A sessions. All of the workshops are in this building except for AID, automated insulin delivery, and devices. So if you want to see David on today, his sessions are going to be in the Mission Ballroom, which is across the parking lot. Okay, so you're going to go out these doors across the parking lot. Otherwise, everything is going to be in this vicinity, and I have lots of volunteers around who can direct you. Next on the list, we have some note cards here for you to put your questions on. So if you have any questions, medical questions, please write them down, and at 10 o'clock on Sunday, we have a panel with Trisha and Steve and Schaefer and Eden answering these questions. So please put them down, and we hope to answer them on Sunday. And then last but not least, tonight is our Party in Paradise with Eric, the guy in the back, our digital director. His band is going to be up here covering some amazing Beatles tunes. And he performs all over San Diego, always sold out. We're so lucky not only to have him as our employee, but also to have his entire band here. So please come and dance tonight, and let's party, let's rock, let's twist and shout. Enjoy the health fair and lunch.